Chapter 1668. Good, straightforward. Since that's the case, I'll be frank. Today, the embroidered uniform guard has used thunderous methods to capture people. And the people they've captured are all officials of the observation mission heading to Crimson City. Right now, the streets are in an uproar, and everyone is in danger. Some officials came to beg me, hoping that Duke Mao would be merciful. However, I don't know if Duke Mao would give me some face. Of course, I understand the rules and won't make things difficult for you. The so-called understanding the rules naturally meant giving benefits. Mao Mu was very clear on this point. It was still the same sentence. What was the point of the eunuch turning into this androgynous appearance? Wasn't it just to earn more money? With money in hand, anything was worth it, and there was nothing to fear. After understanding that the other party had come to beg for mercy, Mao Mu's anxious heart relaxed. He was truly worried that the other party might have found out something. Although the contact group that Yang Chendong had arranged for him was unknown even in the Yangtze, it was still in the capital. But after all, this group lived in the capital. If someone wanted to investigate, no one could guarantee that they wouldn't give themselves away. Especially since he had become more and more high-profile recently, there were probably many people secretly investigating him. Kai Zhong was a veteran eunuch of power, and he was also in charge of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He had the power to mobilize troops and countless capable people under his command. Who knew if he had received some information that could threaten him? Mao Mu had been worried about this. If that was the case, then he would have to fight even if he couldn't. It was just a pity that he couldn't complete the mission that Yang Chendong had given him. Now that he knew that Kai Zhong had a favor to ask of him, he could finally put down his anxious heart, and his expression became much more relaxed. However, this small change fell into Kai Zhong's eyes. Which of the eunuchs with power wasn't worry-free? Which of them wasn't an expert at reading people's expressions? When Mao Mu relaxed, Kai Zhong's gaze locked onto him. However, he didn't immediately ask, but he was certain that Mao Mu had a secret that he couldn't let others know. Mao Mu didn't know any of this. He was still interested in asking who had the face to invite eunuch Kai. Haha, I'm sure Duke Mao knows this person as well. He's the current Minister of Works, Wei Luo. He's also a member of the Observer Group. Although he didn't do anything wrong, it's better to be safe than sorry. He still entrusted himself to our family, and is willing to pay 20,000 taels of silver to ensure his safety. What does Duke Mao think about this? Kai Zhong chuckled as he hid what he had just discovered in the depths of his heart, and spoke with a smile. Upon hearing that he was pleading for Wei Luo, Mao Mu had a plan in his heart. This time, the Southern Ming Empire had indeed put in a lot of effort in sending the observation team to Crimson City. The fact that all 6 ministers were present was enough to prove everything. Among them, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had been sent back halfway because he had angered Yang Chendong. The other 5 ministers had observed the entire process. Now 4 of the 5 had already been invited to the embroidered uniform guard, leaving only Verlo, so it was no wonder that he was nervous. However, Mao Mu had no intention of dealing with Verlo. After returning from Crimson City, Verlo had privately said that Crimson City was very powerful, that Yangtze was very powerful, and that the Southern Ming Empire couldn't compare. However, Verlo's abilities were truly limited. Under his leadership, the Ministry of Works hadn't made much progress in the past few years, and the cannons they were building were still solid shells. Verlo's strength lay in flattery, using his high position to seize power and amass wealth. During his time in charge of the Ministry of Works, a few capable officials had been suppressed. How could such people be Mao Mu's target? He clearly knew that Yang Chendong's orders were to arrest all capable officials and disrupt the upper echelons of the Southern Ming Empire's political power. Mediocre officials like Verlo naturally wouldn't be affected. On the contrary, such people should have more power. This way, they would be more in line with Yangtze's interests. Thus, even without Kai Zhong's pleading, Mao Mu wouldn't have made a move against Verlo. He still needed to keep these people to explain to the emperor that not all of the members of the observer group had become disloyal. This was clear proof. Haha, Verlo, to be honest, said some things that crossed the line. His name is on the embroidered uniform guard's next arrest list. Although Mao Mu had already decided to let Verlo go and give Kai Zhong face, The process was still important. However, the process was still very important. How to make the other party accept this favor was especially important. Hearing that this was indeed the case, Kaizhong couldn't help but nod. He didn't know what the emperor thought of the observer group, and thought that he wanted to capture them all in one fell swoop. Thus, he naturally didn't doubt Mao Mu's words. Because of this, Kaizhong's face bloomed into a smile. However, he didn't know how disgusting this smile was in Mao Mu's eyes. I'll have to trouble Duke Mao to put more thought into this matter. I'll remember this favor. Kaizhong smiled, his eyes revealing an expectant expression. Mao Mu first pretended to be in a difficult position. Then, as if he had made a decision, he said, "All right, since even Duke Kai has spoken, I'll do my best." Although he said that he would do his best since he had spoken, there was nothing that couldn't be done. Immediately, Kaizhong's smile grew even wider. After discussing business and pocketing the 20,000 taels of silver, Mao Mu left. Seeing his departing figure, Kaizhong gradually put away the smile on his face. With a snap of his fingers, a sturdy man walked into the small courtyard. "Uncle." The man's surname was Kai Ge, and he was Kaizhong's nephew. After entering the palace, Kai Ge had spent a great deal of effort to find this nephew of his among the common people. Then he allowed him to live a life of luxury, and let him continue the Kai family's bloodline. It could be said that he was Kaizhong's trusted aide. Keep an eye on this Mao Mu. I keep feeling that there's something about him that no one knows. Thinking of the relaxed expression on Mao Mu's face, Kaizhong decided to investigate carefully. Perhaps there would be an unexpected surprise. After Mao Mu left Kaizhong, the corners of his mouth rose into a slight smile. Who did he think he was? Treating him to a cup of tea, and taking out 20,000 taels of silver, could solve the problem of a minister? Mao Mu was even certain that the Ministry of Works Minister Wei Luo had taken out more than 20,000 taels of silver. It was just that Kaizhong had embezzled some of it. This was even better. He could kill two birds with one stone. He thought about how to deal with Kaizhong. He had a feeling that the other party's smile was sinister and vicious, like a poisonous snake that would bite in the dark. If he wasn't careful, he could be poisoned to death. The existence of such a person was definitely a hidden danger to his plan. If possible, he had to get rid of him first. Thinking this, Mao Mu returned to the Empress Palace. When he saw the Emperor's imperial carriage, he knew that the Emperor had come to see Empress Qian. He straightened his body and walked into the palace. As the chief eunuch of Empress Qian's palace, Mao Mu had great prestige here. In addition, he was willing to spend money. The eunuchs here were all very respectful when they saw him, and there was a sense of respect that came from their bones. After all, in a place like the palace where internal strife was fierce and people could die at any time, it was very important to have a good subordinate. It meant that your chances of survival would greatly increase. Duke Mao. Duke Mao is back. There were people constantly greeting him, and Mao Mu also responded with a smile. He walked to the Empress Palace and didn't see Qian Sungbao. He probably wasn't on duty today. Thinking that this was a good thing, he could carry out his plan. Thus, he strode into the palace. In the Empress Palace, Empress Qian was eating with Zhu Qizhen. After seeing Mao Mu walk in, Empress Qian didn't care. She was really an empress who stood aloof from worldly affairs, and was extremely kind. She also knew that the eunuchs around her were favored by the emperor and entrusted with important tasks, so she wasn't angry when she didn't see them serving her. If this kind of personality became a concubine in the Qing palace, she probably wouldn't even survive one episode. She would be played to death by others. This subject greets the emperor and empress. Long live the emperor and long live the empress. As soon as he entered the palace, Mao Mu hurriedly knelt on the ground and bowed. Oh, it's beloved official Mao. Quickly get up. Zhu Qizhen glanced at Mao Mu, and his eyes revealed a joyful expression. Then he thought of something and asked, Beloved official Mao, have the important officials been arranged? Remember, you must interrogate them properly, but you must ask according to their physical condition. Don't be too hasty. Some of them are really too old. This wasn't Zhu Qizhen sympathizing with the subordinates. This came from his heart. For example, the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. He was now 84 years old. and it was rare that he still had such a healthy body. Perhaps this was because the food he ate didn't have any waste oil or additives. It was all natural. In reality, Wang's fate had changed because of Yang Qindong's appearance. In history, he died in the Tumu Castle. However, in this life, he was saved and came to the capital of the southern Ming Dynasty. He had been serving Emperor Ingzong and had lived until now. His health was quite good. From this point, it could be seen that Zhu Qizhen really didn't have anyone he could use. Otherwise, at his age, he would have already retired and returned to his hometown. How could he still serve the court? Mao Mu understood Zhu Qizhen's meaning. He immediately bowed and said, "This subject obeys the decree. There is no rush to interrogate them. First, we must protect their bodies. Wait for them to see our southern Ming dynasty defeat Yangxia, and let them know how wrong they are." Zhu Qizhen was only worried that the embroidered uniform guard's methods would be too harsh. As the emperor, he knew some of the embroidered uniform guard's methods. That was why he reminded them. Because once these officials were beaten to death in prison, the other officials would definitely report to the emperor and impeach him. At that time, he would have a headache. Chapter 1669. But unexpectedly, Mao Mu's understanding was to only capture these people and slowly torture them until the day the Southern Ming Empire won, and let these officials see his style as the emperor. This also reminded Zhu Qizhen. He nodded and said with satisfaction, "Yes, that's the reason. Haha, beloved official Mao's words are exactly what we want. Come, reward me." This official doesn't dare to ask for a reward. Everything is what this official should do. Right now, the imperial court is going to exterminate the Yang bandits and it's time to use money. This official wishes to wear armor and go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. How can this official still want the emperor's money to satisfy my own selfish desires? Mao Mu said righteously, and the more he spoke, the straighter his body became. Zhu Qizhen was very moved. "Good, you have ambition. It's just that we don't agree to let you go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. You are a capable person and should be by our side to share our burdens." "Haha, Empress, you've really trained a talent." When he was happy, Zhu Qizhen even praised Empress Qian. Seeing Zhu Qizhen smile, Empress Qian was also very happy. She said, "All of this is the emperor's good fortune. The heavens bless the imperial family, and the emperor has a good eye for people. It has nothing to do with this concubine." Aha! After being flattered by the empress, Zhu Qizhen's mood became even better. He was happy to have such a confidant and a capable subject. However, what made Zhu Qizhen even happier was that Mao Mu once again knelt on the ground and bowed. Reporting to the emperor, this official made a small mistake just now. Just now, eunuch Kai Zhong found this official. Next, Mao Mu recounted what had happened just now from the beginning to the end. Finally, he took out the 20,000 taels of silver and presented it in his hand. "This official doesn't know if what I did was right, because Minister Wei is indeed innocent. However, when I thought that if I refused to accept this money, the other party would inevitably think too much, and I would not be able to work for the emperor with peace of mind. In order to calm the people, I accepted it. Now I am willing to hand over all of the money. This way, there will be more brave warriors on the front lines." Good, good. This time, Zhu Qizhen was so happy that he said good twice. The way Mao Mu handled matters was indeed to his liking. Not only would he be able to appease the fear in the officials' hearts, but he would also be able to collect the silver to fill the treasury. Wasn't this the best of both worlds? Most importantly, this matter didn't need to be reported. Neither Kai Zhong, who was the middleman, nor Wei Luo, who carefully handed over the silver, would tell anyone about it. However, Mao Mu still reported the matter to him. Wasn't this a sign of loyalty? Mao Mu's indifference towards 20,000 taels of silver proved that he was not greedy. Handing over the money in full proved that the other party was worried about national affairs. Wasn't this kind of loyal and capable eunuch exactly what he needed the most? Speaking of which, Zhu Qizhen's personality was somewhat of a perfectionist. He always wished that the people around him were made of stone, that they could not eat or drink, but they could fight on horseback and rule the country as soon as they dismounted. But where in the world could such a perfect person be found? He used to think that Wang Zhen was such a person, but reality proved that he was wrong. Later on, he believed that Qian Sengbao, Chao Jixiang and Kai Zhong were such people. However, after some observation, they all had their own shortcomings. Now that Mao Mu had jumped out, he realized that he had found the ideal candidate. Now he only hated that he hadn't discovered this kind of talent earlier. He had been forced to waste more than 10 years in the palace. Satisfied, he looked at Mao Mu with even more joy. Zhu Qizhen didn't know that Mao Mu was now even more important than Qian Sengbao, who had followed him for more than 10 years. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen was happy, Mao Mu also raised his head with a happy expression. He displayed the joy of a ruler perfectly. Beloved subject, we have seen everything you have done. Do well, and in the future, you might be able to become a figure like Zheng He. Zhu Qizhen was truly happy and compared Mao Mu to the three treasures eunuchs. Mao Mu naturally knelt down in gratitude and called out, "Long live the emperor." Afterwards, he took advantage of Zhu Qizhen's happiness to mention that there were still a few officials who hadn't been arrested because their ranks were low. He also said that today's matter shouldn't be spread. Otherwise, if eunuch Kai Zhong found out, he would lose face and appear out of place. It would be difficult to carry out his work in the future. Of course, Zhu Qizhen would follow Mao Mu's instructions. He said that he saw Mao Mu's loyalty and told him to do things without worry. He knew in his heart that he wouldn't let a capable official be wronged. He also said that the war was imminent. Anyone who had problems must be arrested. Even those who suspected problems must be arrested. According to the previous method, they didn't need to be severely punished. He told them to wait and see how he defeated Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong. Also, if there were still people who interceded and gave money, he should accept it. The money in the national treasury was getting less and less, and he was eager to replenish it. Zhu Qizhen finally left happily. After Mao Mu helped Empress Qian rest, he left the palace. The palace was forbidden, and it was very difficult for ordinary people to enter and leave the palace. However, with Mao Mu's current status, unless the emperor specifically ordered that no one was allowed to move, it was very easy to leave the palace. After leaving the palace, Mao Mu first brought a few of his eunuchs to the embroidered uniform guard. Coincidentally, Shen Nantang, Wu Ben Luozhu, and the others were all there. He told them about the emperor's decree, which was to take care of the old officials and not let anything happen to them in prison. They could consider giving each of them a single room, so that they could come out every day and eat and drink as much as possible. If they didn't have enough money, they could inform their family to send it. Also, from tomorrow onwards, they would continue to arrest people according to the list. Of course, that list was provided by Mao Mu and also by the Yangxia Intelligence Department. They were all capable officials, and what they needed to do now was to catch them all in one fell swoop. In short, it was a sentence that would paralyze the Southern Ming Dynasty, break the tacit cooperation between the various departments, and thus reduce the Southern Ming Dynasty's fighting strength. Mao Mu's words fell into the ears of the embroidered uniform guard, which was equivalent to an imperial edict. Immediately, everyone bowed their heads and cupped their fists in agreement. After seeing that there was nothing else to do in the embroidered uniform guard, Mao Mu left. Then, seemingly unintentionally, he went to the silk shop that he often went to. Mao Mu didn't know that behind him, Kai Ge was quietly following him with a few trusted subordinates. When he saw him enter the embroidered uniform guard, he had been waiting outside. When he saw him come out and didn't immediately return to the palace, he followed him. Mao Mu was still a little inexperienced, and the results he obtained during the day made him a little arrogant. Right now, he was anxious to report all of this to Bugnam of Gojoseon and receive praise and recognition. The few eunuchs around him had received a lot of benefits from Mao Mu. Now that Mao Mu's status had skyrocketed, not only the empress, but even the emperor relied heavily on him. Naturally, they would follow Mao Mu wherever he went. Although the sky was already dark, it wasn't yet time for curfew on the streets. The silk shop's door was still open, and Mao Mu led a few eunuchs inside. Take a good look and see if there are any good satin brocades. Pick out some and send them to the Empress Palace. After some casual instructions, Mao Mu, as usual, was warmly invited by the shopkeeper into the inner room to drink tea. Outside the silk shop, Kai Ge and his people couldn't see what was going on. After all, They knew that the empress liked satin brocades, and would sometimes make them into finished products for money to support the palace's expenses. Unable to see what was going on or where the problem was, Kaigu decided to sneak into the silk shop and see what Maomu was doing. This was his uncle's intention, and he had to obey. As to whether or not it would be dangerous, what a joke. He had learned martial arts from an expert since he was a child. The so-called "the skilled are bold" was used to describe people like him. The people surrounded the silk shop from different directions, and then used what they had learned. They either climbed over the wall or jumped onto the roof to find what Maomu was doing at this moment. At this time, Maomu was completely unaware of what was happening outside. He was talking to the shopkeeper of the silk shop, who was also the leader of the contact group, about what had happened today. He was going to report it to Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram. Kai Ji's skills were indeed not bad. Although he was tall and sturdy, his body was actually very agile. After a few jumps, he reached the top of the silk shop. Then, he lifted the roof tiles one by one, trying to find where Maomu was. Finally, after flipping over a few tiles, they saw Maomu with his hands behind his back under the light of the coal lamp. He was saying something, and there was someone sitting in front of him. There was something in front of him that they didn't know what it was called, and it was beeping and fiddling with it. Because of his lack of knowledge, Kaigu didn't know what a telegram was, so he wanted to take a closer look. He lowered his head and wanted to take a closer look, but then he felt a pain in his neck, followed by a wave of dizziness, and he fainted. Cold water splashed on Kai Ji's face, and he slowly woke up. He saw Maomu sitting in front of him. There were a few big men standing next to him. One of them was like an iron tower, and the muscles all over his body seemed to be about to burst out of his clothes. Based on his intuition, he knew that these people were not to be trifled with. When he thought about how he was knocked unconscious without even feeling it, he was even more certain of the other party's strength. At this moment, he had to be scared. He could only show a trace of a fawning expression and said, "Mr. Mao, all of this is a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. Maomu suddenly stood up, very angry. How dangerous tonight was. If it wasn't for his heavy work, and if it wasn't for the fact that Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong had considered this and sent the Wolf Fong special forces to assist him early, he would have suffered a great loss. Not only would his identity be exposed, but the task would also not be completed. In that case, more than 10 years of hiding would be ruined. Although Yang Qindong might not blame him afterwards, he would definitely blame himself. Chapter 1670. He was angry at his own carelessness and also angry at Kai Zhong's ruthlessness. On the surface, Kai Zhong thanked him, but later on he arranged for people to investigate him. He was really a dog that bit, but didn't bark. Feeling that it was about time, Maomu knew that he couldn't stay for long. He looked at the big man beside him and said, "Captain Tai, I'll leave everything here to you. This person is the nephew of head eunuch Kai Zhong. He must know a lot of secrets." "Don't worry, eunuch Mao." Captain Tai, who was also the captain of the special forces, Tai Hu grinned. For such an interrogation, their special forces had their own means. Some were taught by Yang Qindong, and some were figured out by themselves. But no matter what, no one who was questioned by them could withstand it. Seeing that Maomu was about to leave, Kaigu panicked. He knew that if he really left and handed himself over to the big man, he wouldn't be able to die a good death. So he shouted loudly, "Eunuch Mao, you can't do this to me. I didn't come alone this time. I brought a few subordinates with me. They are all good at martial arts. If I don't go back, they will definitely report to my uncle. Then you will be in trouble." "Oh, are you talking about the 5 people who came with you? That's called good at martial arts. Haha, they are just like you. You don't even know how you were knocked unconscious. How dare you threaten others?" Taihu sneered. Needless to say, if he dared to say that, the other 5 people must have been restrained. Perhaps they were already being tortured. Maomu didn't care about this. He strode out of the basement and walked out of the silk shop. He brought the eunuch who had just picked out the brocade and went straight to the palace. Maomu was back. Kai Zhong also received the news, but he didn't see his nephew. He thought that he stayed in that woman's stomach again, so he didn't pay much attention to it. But until noon the next day he still didn't see his nephew. He started to get anxious and sent many people to look for him, but there was no useful news. Kaizhong didn't understand what was going on. He wanted to look for Mao Mu, but he sent people to spy on him. It was uncertain whether Mao Mu knew about it. Even if he knew, would he tell him where Kai Ge was? He was the one being unreasonable. Investigate. Even if we have to turn the entire capital upside down, we have to find him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Kai Ji's heart ached when he said this. That was the only heir of the Kai family, and they were counting on him to carry on the family line. Now he couldn't even find him. How was he going to explain this to his dead brother? Mao Mu ignored Kai Ge as if nothing had happened. He continued to do what he was supposed to do. For a time, more and more people were being arrested. At first, it was only the officials of the observer group. Now some officials who were not part of the observer group were also being arrested. The explanation given by the embroidered uniform guards was that these officials had been bewitched by the observation team's officials, and their hearts had begun to waver. They were unstable people. However, if someone could calm down and think about it, they would realize that those who were arrested were undoubtedly capable or officials who were more competent in their posts. However, at this time, the brocade guard was capturing people everywhere. The officials of the capital were all in danger, so no one had the time to analyze these matters. Right now, they were most afraid that a group of embroidered uniform guards would suddenly come knocking on their door and arrest them. After all, out of the 6 ministers, 4 of them had already been captured. Anything could happen. These officials didn't think that those who were arrested were all capable officials. Instead, they began to analyze how they could avoid being arrested. Kuang Yi was the grand tutor of the crown prince, and also the minister of war. He was also a member of the observer group. However, since he was expelled, he had already made his stance clear. It was normal for the brocade guard to not make a move on him. Minister Wei Luo was different. He led the officials of the Ministry of Works to participate in the observer group. After returning, he wrote a memorial to the emperor, requesting for more investment in the Ministry of Works, more money to develop weapons, and to raise the status of technical talents in society. These were all things he learned in Qiqian City. In other words, he believed that the Yangtze's industrial and manufacturing capabilities were far superior to the southern Ming dynasties. How could a minister who only praised the Yangtze and belittled the southern Ming dynasty not be arrested? How did he manage to save his own skin? Since someone asked this question, someone else would answer it. Soon Wei Luo sent 50,000 taels of silver to eunuch Kaizhong. Kaizhong acted as the middleman and pleaded with the brocade guard's eunuch Mao Mu. Now that they knew that sending money could guarantee their safety, the officials who hadn't been implicated began to take action. They used various connections to find Qian Sungbao or Kaizhong, asking them to pass on a message. There were also people who directly went to find Mao Mu and brought large amounts of money. Eunuch Mao Mu, who no one paid attention to at first, quickly became one of the most influential chief eunuchs. His status even surpassed Kaizhong's, and was second only to Qian Sungbao. When large amounts of money and favors were brought to him, Mao Mu didn't let money get to his head. Mao Mu was very clear that he was only where he was today because of Yang Qindong's support. Otherwise, he would still be a nameless eunuch. Perhaps he wouldn't have come to the southern Ming dynasty, and would still be in Baiming's capital. It was even possible that he would have died in the internal strife among the eunuchs. Yang Qindong had given him a new life. Now that Yang Xie was very powerful, it could be imagined that as long as he followed closely, his future would be limitless. His future would definitely be brighter than his current position in the southern Ming dynasty. How could Mao Mu, who had steeled his heart to follow Yang Qindong, care about these silver taels that were delivered to his door? Not only did he not care, he even decided to use these silver taels to make an issue out of it. Thus, he took advantage of an opportunity when Qian Sungbao wasn't on duty and secretly met with Zhu Qizhen. While handing over a large amount of silver taels, he also sold off the officials who had sent the money. When the 1.5 million taels of silver taels were placed on the table, Zhu Qizhen was shocked. Previously, Wei Luo was a minister, and had only sent 20,000 taels of silver taels. However, when he looked at the list that Mao Mu had presented, it showed that a fourth-rank official in the capital had sent 50,000 taels of silver just to buy his own safety. Was it really worth it to pay so much? Furthermore, where did these officials get the money? It was impossible to rely on salary alone, so they could only use power and corruption to get it. When he thought about how there were so many corrupt officials under his command, Zhu Qizhen was very angry. He was an idealist and wanted nothing more than to immediately issue an edict to investigate and punish these officials. However, after he calmed down, he still didn't do so. If these officials were punished, who would take care of them for him? He couldn't possibly do everything himself as the emperor, right? Forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart, Zhu Qizhen looked at the list in his hand and comforted himself. Fortunately, there are only 30 or so officials here. Reality proves that most of the officials are honest. Originally, this was meant to comfort himself, but he didn't expect that reality would quickly slap him in the face. Mao Mu, who had been waiting there, opened his mouth again and said, "Reporting to your majesty, these are only the officials who came directly to this subject. This is only the first batch. I believe that there will be a second and third batch. Because of this subject's status, there aren't many people who came to this subject. The officials who came to find Eunuch Qian and Eunuch Kai are the ones who can be called many. It seems that there are more than 100 of them." What? Zhu Qizhen, who had just sat down, couldn't help but tilt his body. He almost lost his seat and slipped onto the dragon throne. Fortunately, he reached out his hands in time and stabilized his body. However, he was already unable to vent his anger. Could it be that my officials already don't know what it means to be clean and honest? Your Majesty, please quell your anger. Seeing Zhu Qizhen's angry dragon face, Mao Mu knew that he had to pour some water on him to calm his anger. Even if it wasn't for others, even if it was for Yang Qindong's grand plan, he had to do this. He couldn't really have Zhu Qizhen kill all of these officials who had sent gifts, right? If that really happened, not only would Zhu Qizhen not kill them, he would also have to reflect on whether it was right to have the embroidered uniform guards arrest them. If that really happened, the grand plan to weaken the southern Ming Empire before the war would be interrupted. This was something that Mao Mu definitely didn't want to see. After mulling over what to say, Mao Mu opened his mouth and said, "Your Majesty, in reality, this is just everyone feeling insecure. According to this subject's knowledge, some officials, in order to save their lives and gather money, even sold their ancestral property just to gather enough money to save their lives. This is enough to show that there are still quite a few honest officials who are serving the country. It's just the general trend. This subject thinks that we might have pushed them too far. Therefore, this subject believes that we should arrest those who have problems and just take the money from those who don't have problems and add it to the country's treasury. This way, those officials who have no money and have nothing to do will definitely do their best to be loyal to your Majesty. They already have no capital and have no other choice but to wholeheartedly serve the country. Your Majesty." Amen. When Zhu Qizhen heard this, the anger on his face faded a lot. That's right. Beloved official Mao's words are reasonable. Since that's the case, we will allow it. They could continue to find problematic officials and stabilize the court, so that they wouldn't be frightened by Yang Xia before the war. They could also collect a large sum of money for the court's use. It would be strange if Zhu Qizhen didn't agree to such a result. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen had agreed, Mao Mu immediately praised the emperor for his wisdom. He then said, "Your Majesty, it's true that this subject's method is good, but this subject will inevitably offend Eunuch Qian and Eunuch Kai. If they complain to your Majesty, I'm afraid this subject's shoulders aren't wide enough and hard enough. It's fine. Beloved official, you do things wholeheartedly for the country. We know this. Just do it boldly." On the other hand, they dared to keep a portion of the money in their hands even though it was clearly given by the officials. We are already benevolent for not finding fault with them. Zhu Qizhen waved his hand magnanimously. He increasingly found that Mao Mu was a subject who wholeheartedly served the country and was wholeheartedly loyal to him. He wasn't greedy and didn't take the money. He handed over as much money as the officials gave him. Just this point alone made him much better than the others. Chapter 1671. Take that Kai Zhong for example. Wei Luo had given him 50,000 taels of silver, but he had only given Mao Mu 20,000 taels of silver. He had actually pocketed more than half of it, much to Zhu Qizhen's displeasure. With these 30,000 taels of silver, the imperial court could do a few more things, could it not? Mao Mu had been waiting for Zhu Qizhen to say this. This way his position would be secure. He immediately kowtowed again, praising the emperor's wisdom. Crimson City. Yang Chendong had already returned. He had spent 3 days on the sea and learned that Yang Xie was very stable. Even though he had not appeared and his safety was unknown, under the leadership of the Crown Prince Yang Bo, everyone was carrying out their duties. The only difference was that there were many more ships on the sea. They were the search party, used to search for Yang Chendong. Yang Xie's situation was stable, and Yang Chendong was very satisfied with this result. He decided to return to Crimson City. Since his son had passed the test, and the officials of Yang Xie had also passed the test, there was no need for him to hide. After all, there were still many important things to do. Yang Chendong's reappearance on the docks of Crimson City naturally drew cheers from the officials of Yang Xie. Yang Xie had been created by Yang Chendong, and he was the backbone of everyone. In this aspect, Yang Bo could not compare. But after this incident, Yang Chendong could see that Yang Bo was a promising talent. He had decided to slowly hand over his authority, so that he could train Yang Bo. Not only him, his descendants would have to do the same. And that was to hand over power while they were still alive. Speaking of which, in history, the change of dynasties was the easiest time to cause problems. When an old emperor passed away and a new emperor ascended the throne, a single mistake would result in a rain of blood and a sea of heads falling to the ground. When one's strength was severely damaged, it would often take a long time for one to recover. And at this time, the new emperor was old, and it wouldn't be long before the old and the new were replaced, causing more heads to fall to the ground. How could one prevent this from happening? Yang Chendong's idea was to transfer his power to the old emperor while he was still alive, becoming the retired emperor. Of course, there were drawbacks to doing this. For example, how could 2 tigers live on the same mountain? If the 2 emperors didn't like each other, wouldn't there be internal strife? For this reason, Yang Chendong had thought of a solution. For example, before the old emperor passed away, he could retain a portion of his military power. If there was a major incident, he could skip the command of the new emperor and so on. This should be enough to protect himself. Of course, this was still an immature idea. More importantly, Yang Chendong believed that by doing this, they could avoid the problems that would arise when the 2 emperors were replaced. Otherwise, it would be like Kangxi's edict of succession in history. One said that the throne would be passed to the 14th elder brother, while the other said that the throne would be passed to the 4th elder brother. Even until now, there were still many opinions. Yang Chendong returned to Qiqian City, and the Beiming Imperial Court's observation group also set off. The Tianjin Guard boarded the ship and headed straight for Qiqian City. On this point, Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu both had the same idea, which was to know oneself and know one's enemy to win 100 battles. Perhaps they both knew that the battle with Yang Xie was unavoidable, so it was naturally a good thing to know about it in advance. As for the observation group, the 2 emperors gave great support. Different from the last time, Yang Chendong personally came to welcome the Southern Ming observation group. Moreover, he brought his wife, Queen Huyan, to the docks. It was because Huyan's relatives were in the Beiming observation group. This time, her grandfather, Hu Xiao, was in the observation group. It had to be said that the lifespan of people in this era wasn't very long. There were many people who died in their 40s, and there were even some who died in their 30s. However, most of them were ordinary people who couldn't eat well, and couldn't afford to wear clothes. Those officials were not included. Not only that, but there were also some people who lived very long lives. For example, Huyan's grandfather, Hu Xiao, was one of them. In history, he lived for a full 85 years. Because of Yang Chendong's arrival, he unexpectedly broke through this age limit. Now he was already 92 years old. It was said that his body was still quite good. At the very least, he could still walk with the support of others and didn't collapse on the bed. Hu Xiao could be said to be the oldest among the officials. Adding on the fact that he had entered politics at a young age, He could already be considered an old official of 4 dynasties. This time, when he found out that there was an opportunity to enter Qiqian city, he took the initiative to apply to the emperor. When Zhu Qiyu had already collapsed on the bed, his body gradually weakening, Crown Prince Zhu Jianji considered that Hu Xiao was already quite old. Even if he stayed in Baiming, he wouldn't be able to become an official, so he agreed to his application. However, he made it clear that only Hu Xiao from the Hu family could go. The others could join the observation group. From this, it could be seen that Zhu Jianji was still quite wary of Yang Qindong. Leaving the Hu family behind was also a method to keep him in check. Speaking of this Zhu Jianji in history, he died prematurely at the age of 7. It was also because of his relationship with Yang Qindong that he took out Western medicine to save his life. Now he was already a young man of 20 years old. Since her grandfather had come, as his granddaughter, Hu Yan naturally had to come out to greet him. Considering the special nature of Hu Zhao's identity and his age, Yang Qindong also came along. Hu Yan was so moved that she broke into tears. Yang Qindong and the queen both came out to greet them, causing the people on the docks to gather together and become even more magnificent. When they saw a ship coming from afar, someone on the docks had already reported it. At this moment, Hu Yan tightly grabbed Yang Qindong's arm, appearing very excited. 1 year had passed just like that. Finally, she could see her family again. The excitement in Hu Yan's heart could be imagined. Yang Qindong naturally didn't feel any excitement. Not only did Zhu Jianji not allow Hu Yan's parents to come with the observation group, even his brothers and sisters weren't allowed to join the observation group. In other words, the Yang family was still in Baiming's capital. Although Yang Qindong had already made arrangements for them to not put their lives in danger or make their lives difficult, it was still somewhat regretful that they couldn't see them. As for Baiming, Yang Qindong's plan was even bigger. Whether it was in the imperial court or in the army, he had arranged his own chess pieces, and their status wasn't low. As long as the time was right, they could launch a counterattack at any time. However, Yang Qindong didn't make a move. He was waiting for the day when Zhu Qiyu died. At that time, the young emperor, Zhu Jianji, would need some time to take control of the imperial court. At that time, Yang Xie's army would attack. Zhu Qiyu was ordered to be in danger, and with Yang Qindong's help, he was able to turn the tide. These years, he had worked hard for the country and had a lot of prestige. At the very least, Baiming could be united with him as the core. Once he was gone, with his useless son, the unity of the country would only be on the surface. He needed to wait for the right time to attack Baiming, but he didn't need to be so polite to the southern Ming. With Zhu Qizhen's imperial edict in Chao Jixiang's hands, Yang Qindong had enough reason to attack the southern Ming. The only reason he hadn't made a move now was because the military supplies weren't in place yet. Now it seemed that this was the time. When he thought about attacking the southern Ming, Yang Qindong couldn't help but think of Mao Mu. This chess piece that he had arranged many years ago had finally come into play, and its power was far greater than he had imagined. Before the battle, the southern Ming already had internal strife. The people's hearts weren't united, and everyone was in danger. Once Yang Xie's army arrived, the result could be imagined. This made Yang Qindong very satisfied with Mao Mu. At this time, Mao Mu was still busy at Yingtian Manor in the capital. Whether it was Qian Sengbao or Kaizhong, they didn't know that Mao Mu had secretly met with the emperor and handed over the ransom money he received. They were still using this opportunity to make a big profit. This was especially true for Qian Sengbao. Relying on his identity as the one who supported Mao Mu, he didn't give Mao Mu a single tael of silver. He only handed over the list of officials that he wanted to protect, saying that they were all his people, so he had to be magnanimous. Under Qian Sengbao's forceful attitude, Mao Mu chose to continue to endure. At the same time, he made a detailed report to Zhu Qizhen. In his own words, the reason why he could be where he was today was all because of the emperor's great kindness. He only listened to the emperor. As for other people, no matter how great their kindness was to him, he would at most help them within his authority. However, when it came to imperial power, he would still choose to listen to the emperor without hesitation. When Zhu Qizhen heard Mao Mu's confession, he was very happy. He praised Mao Mu as the most loyal official in the current court and told him to be at ease. Zhu Qizhen valued Mao Mu more and more. He began to have opinions about Qian Sengbao. This man, he was always afraid of being compared to others. With this comparison, it was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. Qian Sengbao, who seemed to be good at everything in the past, now made Zhu Qizhen feel dissatisfied with everything he did. He even thought about whether or not he should let Mao Mu replace him. Compared to Qian Sengbao's bossy attitude, Kaizhong was more restrained. At the very least, he would give a portion of the benefits to Mao Mu. However, no matter what he did, he had already entered Mao Mu's death list. This was not only because Kaizhong had sent his nephew Kai Ge to follow him. More importantly, he had reached out to the discipline prison of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. He had bribed the Embroidered Uniform Guard's jailers to meet Chao Jixiang's nephew, Chao Xian, who was the son of the former Embroidered Uniform Guard commander Chao Zheng. He wanted to use him for his own purposes. In the Chao family, other than Chao Jixiang, there was also Chao Xian. It was Chao Xian who had led people to ambush Yang Qindong and Baiming. It was just that they had not succeeded. Kaizhong had found this person as a helper. It was clear that he had good taste. However, he had angered Mao Mu. Not to mention that the Chao family was now Mao Mu's mortal enemy. Once he ransomed Chao Xian, it would directly threaten his own safety. Just the fact that Chao Xian had once ambushed Yang Qindong made it impossible to let him live. Chapter 1672. The reason why Chao Xian was still alive in the Discipline Commission of the Embroidered Uniform Guard was because Mao Mu wanted to personally hand him over to Yang Qindong. But since Kaizhong wanted to do this, he had to make a move in advance. First, he sent a telegram to Yang Qindong to ask if he could kill Chao Xian now. Then he found eunuch Qian Sengbao and explained what Kaizhong would do next. Once Chao Xian was released, he would be the first to come after him. Next, he would not let Qian Sengbao go. Qian Sengbao was not an ordinary eunuch. Although he was not a man, he still had a residence outside the palace for his face. Not only that, but he also kept a few beauties in his residence. Although he could not do anything, he could still let them pour him tea and massage his legs during his break. That was also a kind of enjoyment. Once Chao Xian was released, who knew whether or not he would ambush him outside the residence for revenge? This was someone who even dared to ambush Bugnam of Gojoseon. Thinking of this, Qian Sengbao's face revealed a fierce gaze. Kill him now. But this person is wanted by eunuch Kaizhong. Mao Mu pretended to be in a difficult position. No matter, I will talk to him. In short, we have to nip any danger in the bud. Qian Sengbao's voice carried a sinister intent. Now he had borrowed Mao Mu's name to get a lot of money. He wanted to enjoy his life and did not want anyone to threaten his safety. Understood. Mao Mu nodded and agreed. What happened next was simple. After dinner, Chao Xian died in the discipline prison. When the news reached Kaizhong's ears, he was naturally furious. Even if he closed his eyes and used his toes to think, he knew that this was Mao Mu's doing. Do you really think your wings are strong? Gritting his teeth, the angry Kaizhong decided to unite more eunuchs to deal with Mao Mu. There were 24 eunuchs in the entire group of eunuchs. Each eunuch had a chief eunuch and 1/3 of them listened to him. Once they joined forces, Mao Mu would have a hard time in the palace. Scheming against scheming, there would always be countless sinister methods. Most of the time, such methods could even take a person's life. For example, if the eunuch in charge of the food shop wanted to make things difficult for Mao Mu, then in the entire Empress Palace, other than the master, the food that the other eunuchs and palace maids ate was either too salty to swallow or too bitter to curse. In addition, there would be various problems with the use of the eunuchs and palace maids. In this way, it wouldn't be long before all the eunuchs and palace maids in the Empress Palace hated Mao Mu. If that was the case, who would listen to him? When the problem affected the master, Mao Mu would fall out of favor and even be replaced. After all, Kaizhong had been in business for so many years. He had many loyal followers in the 24 prisons. Once he made up his mind to deal with someone, the consequences would be very serious. At this time, Kaizhong had already begun to imagine Mao Mu begging him. At that time, He would use his actions to tell the other party that he was not someone to be trifled with. Unfortunately, just as Kai Zhong gathered the eunuchs who listened to his orders, Qian Sungbao sent someone to deliver a message. The general idea was that Mao Mu was now a favorite of the emperor, and was doing something important. If anyone wanted to find trouble with him, they would be going against the emperor. As the chief eunuch, he would have to punish those who didn't open their eyes according to the family rules. Qian Sungbao gave a very good reason, so everyone knew that Mao Mu was now the director of the embroidered uniform guard, and was arresting people every day. From time to time, the emperor would call him for questioning. With such an excuse, it made things difficult for the other eunuchs. In addition, Mao Mu wasn't idle during this period of time. He used money to open a path, and really roped in 3 chief eunuchs. When he and Qian Sungbao combined their power, they suppressed Kai Zhong. Just like that, a plot against them in the dark ended before it could even begin to take action. Kai Zhong, who was covered in dirt, lost his prestige in the entire group of eunuchs because of this. Many people had already begun to wonder if they should change their allegiance. In ancient times, people paid attention to heaven, earth ruler, family, and teacher. Often, they wouldn't change their allegiance for the rest of their lives. Many people's orders would even change according to the fate of their teacher. But to the eunuchs, this was bullshit. They were a group of people who changed their helm according to the wind. When you were in power, they couldn't wait to become lapdogs to flatter you. On the other hand, when you were in power, people who didn't know you would step on you in order to vent their resentment of a man who was no longer a normal man. Feeling the change in the other chief eunuchs, Kai Zhong became anxious. He knew that if he didn't do anything, what awaited him would be the eunuchs being disloyal to him. In the end, he was afraid that he would be abandoned by everyone and wouldn't be able to die a good death even if he wanted to. In for a penny, in for a pound. Since these chief eunuchs were unreliable, Kai Zhong used his authority to mobilize soldiers and horses to begin to obstruct the embroidered uniform guard from handling the case. The imperial horse supervisor was in charge of the imperial stable and the commander's seal, so he had his own private army. It was just that the number of people was small. Under normal circumstances, without a decree, they didn't dare to mobilize privately. But this time, in order to stifle Mao Mu's development and show his strength, Kai Zhong couldn't care less. Mao Mu didn't think that Kai Zhong would be so daring as to mobilize the imperial horse supervisor's men without a decree. For a while, many of the embroidered uniform guard who had been sent out to capture people came back, saying that they had encountered difficulties. The people they wanted to capture were protected, and they couldn't act without orders. Mao Mu was worried that he wouldn't have any evidence to use against him. After hearing the reports from his subordinates, he went straight to the Qingjing Hall where the emperor worked. Today, Qian Sungbao was on duty. He was standing beside Zhu Qizhen, waiting on the emperor to read memorials. A young eunuch came to report that eunuch Mao had come. "Let him in," Zhu Qizhen said without raising his head. But he quickly stopped writing. He wondered if Mao Mu had come to give him money. Did he need to send Qian Sungbao away? After all, this great companion wasn't bad. The only thing was that he was a bit greedy. He had always wanted the other party to take the initiative to hand over the money he had embezzled. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen any movement. If Mao Mu really came to give him money and he saw it, what would he do? Even if he handed over the money at that time, it would be equivalent to being forced. It wouldn't be considered taking the initiative to admit his mistake. While Zhu Qizhen was still thinking about these things, Mao Mu had already walked into the main hall. Then, with a plop, he knelt on the ground and said with an aggrieved expression, "Long live the emperor. Beloved official, why do you have to be so courteous? Is something the matter?" Zhu Qizhen's face carried a trace of surprise. Although the great Ming Dynasty had a ceremony of kneeling, it wasn't done every time they saw the emperor. It was only done when they were particularly excited or angry. Zhu Qizhen felt that something was wrong, so he asked this question. Using this question, Mao Mu raised his head and said, "Emperor, the embroidered uniform guard received orders to arrest people. Although there have been more arrests recently, they are all suspicious. There are also some people who have solid evidence and can be punished at any time. But I don't know why the emperor suddenly stopped arresting people and didn't give this official a decree. Right now, this official really doesn't know what to do. Huh. Zhu Qizhen was dumbfounded by these words. What, stop arresting people? He didn't give such a decree. Out of curiosity, he asked, Beloved official, what is going on? Tell me in detail. Yes. Looking at Zhu Qizhen's confused expression, Mao Mu knew that this was done by Kai Zhong on his own. Since this was the case, this matter was easy to handle. This time, the other party definitely wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Although he couldn't rely on this matter to defeat the other party, he could at least suppress the other party's momentum and let more eunuchs see who was the sturdier one. Don't underestimate this influence. When it came to the ability to take advantage of the situation, if eunuchs said they were second, no one would dare to say they were first. Mao Mu immediately told him about the problems the embroidered uniform guards encountered when they went out to investigate and arrest people. According to the soldiers who obstructed them, it was an order from the Imperial Horse Supervisor. Now the embroidered uniform guards can't do their job as scheduled. Some of the officials' attitudes have even become arrogant. On one hand, they say that the Yangxia is stronger than the Southern Ming. On the other hand, they also say that the Southern Ming court is wrong and the embroidered uniform guards are incompetent. They say that they can't even unify the government. How can such a country talk about winning wars? Enough. Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the dragon throne, was angry. Of course, this anger wasn't directed at Mao Mu. He hated Kai Zhong for not being able to accomplish anything, but more than enough to spoil things. He actually tried to tear down his own people. It was truly infuriating to hear. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen was angry, Mao Mu tactfully shut his mouth. However, he didn't forget to look at Qian Sengbao, who was standing to the side. Qian Sengbao understood the meaning behind Zhu Qizhen's gaze, and knew that it was time for him to make an appearance. He nodded lightly and said, Your Majesty, it must be said that eunuch Kai has been a little arrogant recently. He relied on the little bit of merit he made in the past, and didn't put anyone in his eyes. Especially recently, I heard that many officials have already sought him out. There are even quite a few who want to acknowledge him as their godfather. Hee, how laughable is it when you think about it? A scholar actually wants to acknowledge Kai Zhong, who is illiterate, as his godfather. If this trend isn't properly suppressed, I'm afraid that there will be trouble in the end. It might even lead to a conflict between factions. This subject is thinking that there won't be a day when these officials won't even look at imperial edicts. They won't know who your majesty is, and will have to act according to his wishes. Qian Sengbao's words weren't just sprinkling salt on the wound. He was clearly stabbing it with a knife. Moreover, he was stabbing it again and again, as if he wanted to chop the flesh into pieces. What Zhu Qizhen disliked the most, and was most apprehensive about, was fighting between factions. It wasn't just him. Any emperor would be displeased. Chapter 1673. Once there was a factional conflict, not only would it cause chaos in the court, it would also create an awkward situation where the emperor could not leave the palace. Since ancient times, whenever there was a sign of such a conflict, it would be severely suppressed. Many times, the result of such suppression was the loss of the emperor's power and the weakening of the country. With so many examples from the past, how could Zhu Qizhen tolerate it? He immediately slammed the table and said, Great companion, please write a decree to remove Kai Zhong from the position of Imperial Horse Supervisor. For the time being. When he said this, Zhu Qizhen first looked at Mao Mu, then shook his head slightly and said, Great companion, you will take over. Mao Mu had not been in power for long, and he was busy with the matters of the embroidered uniform guard. Zhu Qizhen thought about it and did not give him more responsibilities, so this task fell to Qian Sengbao. No one would complain about not having enough power. When Zhu Qizhen issued this decree, Qian Sengbao was so happy that he immediately knelt and thanked the emperor. Mao Mu left with satisfaction. When he left, Qian Sengbao took the initiative to send him off. The smile on his face was enough to squeeze all the mosquitoes that dared to provoke him. It could be seen how happy he was. Before Mao Mu rose to power, although Qian Sengbao was the chief eunuch, he had Qiao Jixiang and Kai Zhong, the two supervisors of power under him. Most of the time they wouldn't even give him face. Compared to Wang Zhen, who was the emperor's first companion in the past, he was far inferior. In the end, Qian Sungbao was forced to work around the emperor and look after his own affairs. Now, after Mao Mu came to power, he received money and power. If he continued to work hard, there would be a day when he would become the second Wang Zhen. How could Qian Sungbao not be happy? When he saw Mao Mu, how could he not have a smile on his face? Mao Mu was very modest. Although in his plan this Qian Sungbao had to be taken down, but the meal had to be eaten bite by bite. He immediately smiled and said, "All of this is because Qian Sungbao has the emperor's heart. It should have been like this long ago. Qian Sungbao has been careful and conscientious by the emperor's side all these years. Now you are only a eunuch of the imperial horse supervisor, which is very normal." That's right, Kai Zhong had been in the imperial horse directorate for many years, so he must have quite a few trusted aides. Eunuch Qian still had to display his ruthless methods on this trip. He absolutely could not give the other party a chance to rise from the ashes. If one day His Majesty remembers the other party's good points and uses him again, then he will definitely take revenge for what happened today. The congratulations from before were just pleasantries. The reminder at the end was the most important. Mao Mu wanted to see Qian Sungbao and Kai Zhong fight each other, so that he could reap the benefits like a fisherman. "Don't worry, this duke is very capable." As Qian Sungbao spoke, his eyes had already narrowed into slits. Thinking about it, it made sense. For an old fox like him who was used to seeing eunuchs fighting for benefits, once he made a move, Kai Zhong would definitely not be able to stand it. Presumably, those eunuchs who belonged to him would also face the danger of being uprooted. Mao Mu left happily. Now that he had achieved his goal, and no one was holding him back, he had to speed up the brocade guard's work. Once he captured all the capable officials in the capital, he would make a move on the local officials in the provinces. When he wanted Yang Xie's army to pave the way, no one would dare to stand in his way. Qian Sungbao did not disappoint. Soon after, he took the imperial edict written by Zhu Qizhen and went to the imperial horse directorate. From then on, Kai Zhong became one of the chief eunuchs with no power. The ferocity of the situation was completely out of Kai Zhong's expectations. He was still waiting for Mao Mu to come and beg for mercy. Who would have thought that Mao Mu would ignore him and directly report the matter to His Majesty? His Majesty even listened to Mao Mu's words and directly punished Kai Zhong. Although he did not do anything to Kai Zhong, when he was stripped of his power, it was like taking away half his life. What made Kai Zhong even angrier was Qian Sengbao's actions. In just half a day's time, the entire Imperial Horse Directorate had been replaced. Those who were loyal to him had been demoted to other directorates, and had been demoted from eunuchs with real power to minor eunuchs. Based on the history of internal strife among eunuchs, it was needless to say that after being demoted from a high and mighty position, what awaited them would be worse than death. It would definitely be a fate worse than death. Because of this, even if there was a day when His Majesty remembered him again and ordered him to return to the Imperial Horse Directorate, it would take a lot of time for him to raise a group of people again. Kai Zhong was still Kai Zhong. He would not resign himself to death like this. He had to retaliate. He was already thinking of what to say. He wanted to see His Majesty and complain to His Majesty. Based on his past achievements, he believed that as long as His Majesty remembered their old friendship, he would be able to rise again. The next morning, after Zhu Qizhen had a court meeting, he learned that Qian Sungbao was not at the emperor's side, and had instead gone to the Imperial Horse Directorate. Kai Zhong directly went to visit, and had one of his trusted eunuchs by the emperor's side report that he wanted to see the emperor. That day, Zhu Qizhen was in a very bad mood. He found that the number of people in the imperial court, which was held once every 3 days, had decreased by a lot. In order to maintain the operations of the imperial court, he had no choice but to quickly promote officials. However, when he thought about how many of the officials were still inexperienced and were still young, it was still unknown whether they could take charge of the various yamens and make the huge machine that was the Southern Ming Empire operate normally. Just as he was in a bad mood, he looked at the list of officials to be promoted sent by the Ministry of Appointments. When he saw that there were many names that he had not heard of before, his brows furrowed again and again. The emperor managed the officials, The officials managed the small officials managed the small officials, and the small officials managed the common people. This was the basic structure of a country. The emperor only needed to win over the hearts of the officials, and it was the same as controlling the world. However, when he had not heard of the names of the officials, could the emperor still manage them well? Would they be able to work with him and deal with the affairs of the state? At this moment, Zhu Qizhen's heart could not help but waver. Should he release the officials that the embroidered uniform guard had captured? This was just a thought, and he quickly rejected it. It was not for any other reason, but because these were all problematic officials. Once they were released and regained power, what would happen if these people no longer supported the Southern Ming Empire, and instead supported the Yangxie Empire? Wouldn't that be the same as helping the enemy? Forget it. I hope that these new officials can quickly grow up. As he comforted himself like this, a eunuch came to report that eunuch Kai Zhong was outside the hall, and was requesting an audience. Knowing why Kai Zhong was here, Zhu Qizhen originally did not want to see him. However, considering that he had been performing well and was considered loyal, he did not want to give him too much heart. Thinking about it, it was better not to disappoint the other party. He still had to comfort him and let him reflect on it. If there was a chance he could use him again. It had to be said that Zhu Qizhen had indeed become the role model of the emperor when it came to the tolerance of eunuchs. Although some emperors also trusted eunuchs, there had never been anyone like Zhu Qizhen who, after suffering a big loss, taking a big tumble, and even dividing the great Ming dynasty into the north and the south, still did not know how to repent. Kai Zhong had grasped Zhu Qizhen's mentality, and dared to take the initiative to request an audience. If it were any other eunuch, they would probably hide as far away as they could at this moment. After Kai Zhong received permission, he entered the hall. As soon as he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground with a plop. Following that, his face was covered in tears. First, he stated that after dividing the great Ming dynasty between the north and the south, he had traveled from the northern Ming dynasty to the southern Ming dynasty without hesitation. He had traveled thousands of miles just to seek refuge with the emperor. This was because he believed that the emperor was the sacred lord and definitely could not be compared to the despicable Zhu Qiyu. After coming to Yingtian Prefecture, he also worked conscientiously. When he saw the Southern Ming Empire under Zhu Qizhen's rule, he was overjoyed and so on, and the Southern Ming Empire's strength increased greatly. These were all to show off his achievements and flatter Zhu Qizhen in disguise. This was also a trick that Kai Zhong often used. This trick was indeed effective. Zhu Qizhen sat on the dragon throne with a satisfied expression on his face. This was a person who was conquered by his charisma. This was enough to prove that he was more suitable to be the emperor than Zhu Qiyu. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen's mood had improved, Kai Zhong began to complain tearfully. He said that Qian Xingbao and Mao Mu had joined forces to deal with him, and that they could not bear to see others better than them. The reason why he used the power of the Imperial Horse Supervisor was to check and balance the power of the Imperial Horse Supervisor. It was true that the Imperial Horse Guards had arrested too many officials recently, and many of them did not have any problems. It was only because they joined the observation group and saw how powerful Yangxie was that they came back and complained a little. Besides, the observation group was decided by the emperor. How could there be a mistake? It would have been better if Kai Zhong did not mention this. When he mentioned this, Zhu Qizhen's expression changed. Speaking of which, there were 3 things that Zhu Qizhen regretted the most in his life. First, he should not have listened to Wang Zhen's words and personally led the army. This led to the defeat of the Tumu fortress and divided the Great Ming Empire into the northern and southern Ming empires. Second, he should not have let Yang Qindong leave. If he had kept Yang Xie by his side and used his ability to help him, all of Yang Xie's achievements would have been his. This point was somewhat taken for granted. If he had kept Yang Qindong, it would be hard to say if he would have been able to put him in an important position, or if he would have listened to him. After all, if an official's ability was too strong, the emperor would always be afraid of him. Over time, once the official's achievements were too great, he would be killed. Third, the matter of establishing the observation group. Originally, he wanted to see how the other party was developing so that he could know himself and the enemy. If possible, he wanted to learn from the other party's advanced things. However, he did not expect that Yang Xie was too powerful. The members of the observation group actually developed a mentality of fear and brought this atmosphere back to the capital. As a result, the expressions of the officials below changed. Before the war had even begun, everyone was already in a state of panic. The theory of failure had become a mainstream. This was why he had no choice but to use the Imperial Horse Guards to suppress this matter. Chapter 1674. Zhu Qizhen wished that no one would mention such a regretful thing, but Kai Zhong took the initiative to mention it. Listening to him, he was the one who sent the observation group. Even if there was a problem, he should be responsible. This could be considered as provoking his anger. Without waiting for Kai Zhong to continue, Zhu Qizhen asked angrily, "What do you mean many officials have no problem? Do you mean they gave you money so there's no problem?" Kai Zhong, who was talking nonstop, was suddenly interrupted and then asked such a question. For a moment he was stunned and shocked. He didn't expect the emperor to know about this matter. More importantly, the emperor actually made this matter public. Normally, even if the emperor knew about some things, he would not say it publicly. He would only give a limited reminder. This was the scheming of an emperor. If he did not say anything clearly, he would let his subordinates think about it themselves. Often, this would have a greater effect of intimidating people. For a long time, Zhu Qizhen had done this. It indeed had a very good deterrent effect, so that the officials were a little afraid of the emperor. But what did it mean to say it publicly? Was he going to turn hostile? Perhaps it was because Kai Zhong had followed Zhu Qizhen for too long, and had always received the emperor's favor that he had begun to forget his own identity. He didn't think about it. He was just a eunuch, and he thought that the emperor would fall out with him. It would only take a few words to punish him. What was so difficult about that? At first he was stunned. He was a little stunned by Zhu Qizhen's words. After he quickly reacted, his face suddenly changed and he broke out in a cold sweat. He knew that if he didn't make things clear today, not only would the emperor make a decision for him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to make a comeback in the future. At that moment, Kai Zhong knelt on the ground with a plop and repeatedly admitted to being guilty. When he raised his head, he said, "Your Majesty, this official was protecting those officials. And Mao Mu also had a part in this matter. The money that those officials sent ended up in his hands, Your Majesty." He had no choice but to accuse Mao Mu. In Kai Zhong's opinion, there weren't many people by the emperor's side now. Mao Mu was very favored now. If he could pull this person in, presumably, even if it was for Mao Mu's face, this matter would be reduced to a small matter. As long as he could get through this, he would keep a low profile for a while. When the time was right, he would rise again. He thought that he found a scapegoat and Zhu Qizhen would let him off. Eunuchs also had to do things. He couldn't arrest everyone. However, Kai Zhong didn't know that Mao Mu had already prepared for that. The money that Kai Zhong gave Mao Mu had already been sent to the emperor. To be honest, Mao Mu didn't lack money, or Yang Chendong didn't lack money at all. Not to mention the money that was given to Zhu Qizhen. Once the Southern Ming Empire became a part of the Yang faction, this money would eventually return to their pockets. When Kai Zhong was still thinking that Zhu Qizhen would let him go, a roar was heard. "You still have the nerve to talk about money. How much did you embezzle? Tell me." Zhu Qizhen was really angry. Kai Zhong first blindly mentioned the observation group and exposed his scar. Then, he didn't repent and wanted to get Mao Mu off the horse. Did he really think that he had a good temper? Did he really think that he didn't dare to teach him a lesson? Yes, Zhu Qizhen liked Kai Zhong very much. Previously, this person was able to come to Yingtian Prefecture from Baiming, which also proved his loyalty to him. However, to become a suitable subject, loyalty wasn't enough. He also needed to be capable. Not only was he incapable, but he was also very greedy. When he encountered a problem, he didn't want to admit his mistakes. He even wanted to get others off the horse to achieve his goal of making him hesitate. Such a person couldn't be easily forgiven. This. Zhu Qizhen's reaction was completely out of Kai Zhong's expectations. He didn't expect that he would directly ask how much money he had received. Based on his experience of serving Zhu Qizhen all these years, since he asked this question, he must have an answer. When he thought of the punishment of the great Ming dynasty for corrupt officials, Kaizhong was afraid. He kowtowed to the ground and said, "Your Majesty, this subject is guilty. This subject is guilty." But Mao Mu really accepted this subject's money. At this time, Kaizhong still wanted to get Mao Mu off the horse to share his mistake. If he really admitted his mistake, perhaps Zhu Qizhen would really spare him for the sake of his loyalty. At most, he wouldn't put him in an important position in the future. Speaking of which, Zhu Qizhen's use of eunuchs was definitely the highest in history. However, at this time, Kaizhong still wanted to find a scapegoat. How was this admitting his mistake? It was clearly sophistry. Zhu Qizhen was completely disappointed now. He shook his head, and his voice suddenly became much calmer. "Minister Mao Mu has already presented the money you gave him to me. You still dare to accuse a loyal subject. You really disappoint me." "Ah!" Kaizhong once again let out a unique duck-like shriek. Then he fell to his knees on the ground as if there were no bones in his body to support him. He didn't expect Mao Mu to do this. Didn't that mean he had already sold him? He even used this as an excuse to escape punishment. He really didn't know how the word death was written. A eunuch was a eunuch. No matter how strong he was, a word from the emperor would just turn him into ashes. Kaizhong was taken away by the burly general outside the hall. When he left, he didn't beg for mercy because he knew how miserable his fate would be. At this moment, saying anything would be futile. When Mao Mu heard of this matter, it was already 2 hours later. His expression didn't change, but he was a little excited. Chao Jixiang and Kaizhong were finished like this. Should it be Qiansheng's turn to protect them next? Thinking of this, Mao Mu felt that he should do something. Compared to Mao Mu's calmness, Qiansheng Bao was laughing to his heart's content. After all these years, he finally felt like he was in control of the entire group of eunuchs. There were no competitors, and Mao Mu listened to him. In the future, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted? Once he completely integrated this power, he would hear in front of the emperor that was beneficial to him. In this way, no one would shake his foundation. He would become the second Wang Zhen. No. When Wang Zhen was here, there were other eunuchs who shared power. If he did it well, he could be more impressive than Wang Zhen. Qiansheng Bao, who was in a good mood, quickly received good news. Many officials came to find him, especially some officials from other provinces. After the embroidered uniform guard's target moved from the capital to other provinces, officials near the capital began to be arrested. These people, in order to protect themselves, found Qiansheng Bao through the guidance of other officials. After all, Mao Mu didn't accept money. When he met the officials, he always had a cold face, giving people a feeling that he was unapproachable. Kaizhong was completely taken down, so they had no other choice but to find Qiansheng Bao. More and more officials came to see him, and the amount of money they gave him also increased. In a short 3 days, he received 3 million taels of silver. This showed how rich the officials were. It also showed that the money in their hands was far more than what they got from their salaries. Qiansheng Bao also had a good appetite. He would give a reply according to the amount of money sent to him. If they sent a small amount, he would naturally be perfunctory. If they sent a large amount, he would clearly say that he would protect them. If they sent a large amount, he would take time to meet them directly and comfort them. In a short time, Qiansheng Bao became the second parent of many officials. Praises came one after another. Following these officials' words, Eunuch Qian was their life-saving straw. He was their biggest backer. This kind of action naturally attracted the resistance of some self-proclaimed righteous officials. They were either honest officials, or they had been officials for too short a time and couldn't gather much money. However, they were jealous, so they all sent memorials to Seng Qian to protect them. When these memorials were sent to Zhu Qizhen, they were all ignored. The emperor didn't care. Did the people who did things have to be reported? Just like eunuch Mao Mu, weren't there just as many people who reported him? Not to mention, Zhu Qizhen was very conceited. He thought that he understood Qiansheng Bao, and didn't have the guts to steal so much money. If it was 100 or 2,000 taels of silver, he might still dare to do it. However, It was a few million taels of silver. He didn't have the guts. This was Zhu Qizhen's biggest shortcoming. He always liked to be self-righteous. He always thought that he understood everything. He always thought that he was very good at judging people. Wang Zhen was like this before. Qian Seng Bao was like this now. And Mao Mu would also be like this in the future. It was no wonder he lost everything in the end. Mao Mu quietly watched Qian Seng Bao's performance from the side. He also did his best to complete the orders given to him by the other party. He didn't touch any of the names sent by the other party, even though he didn't see a single copper coin of the money sent by these officials. The only thing he did was to memorize the names of these officials and send people to investigate how much money those officials sent to Qian Seng Bao. He also wanted to know in his heart how much money those officials sent to Qian Seng Bao. His thoughts and desires were far greater than Qian Seng Bao's. Qian Seng Bao didn't feel any discomfort with Mao Mu's cooperation. On the contrary, he thought that everything should be done. Just think about it. Even Kai Zhong, such a favored eunuch, was he not also defeated by him? Qian Seng Bao arrogantly thought that Kai Zhong's fall was because of him. Besides, wasn't Mao Mu able to become the head of the embroidered uniform guard today with his help? Chapter 1675. Since he could help the other party, he could also pull the other party down. Listening to his orders now was a sign of intelligence. With this kind of arrogance, Qian Seng Bao walked further and further down the wrong path. Later, when he sent the name list, he was too lazy to see Mao Mu. Instead, he sent the eunuch beside him to do it. At the same time, he was also preparing to find someone to replace Kai Zhong's position. One day, when the opportunity was right, he was even preparing to find someone to replace Mao Mu's position. No matter how obedient Mao Mu was, it was not as good as someone he personally trained. He felt more at ease doing things. Soon, a eunuch named Songda and Zhang Chen entered Qian Sengbao's sight. These two people were good at talking. Every day, they flattered Qian Sengbao like dogs, saying things that made people feel comfortable. In addition to Qian Sengbao's nephew, Qian Liang, the three of them became Qian Sengbao's right-hand men. Under Qian Sengbao's arrangement, the two eunuchs entered the Imperial Horse Directorate and prepared to use their methods to compete for the position of chief eunuch. Qian Liang found his uncle. He wanted to be the commander of the embroidered uniform guard. Qian Liang was a real man, unlike eunuchs. Naturally, there were not many people who could adapt to his position. In comparison, the rank of commander of the embroidered uniform guard was suitable and had great power. The position was impressive enough. Naturally, it was his first choice. This was not the first time Qian Liang had asked for it. In the past, Qian Sengbao had refused, saying that he needed to train. In fact, he wanted to earn money. According to his discussion with Mao Mu, the position of commander was worth 500,000 taels of silver. This did not include the monthly filial piety. But now, with so many officials giving him gifts, he didn't lack this small amount of money. He immediately agreed to his nephew's request. First, when he was serving Zhu Qizhen, he revealed how capable his nephew was. With the imperial favor and trust, Qian Liang became the commander of the embroidered uniform guard as he wished, a third-rank official. Qian Liang happily took up the position. After he arrived at the embroidered uniform guard, he boasted of being the boss and began to give orders. This immediately attracted the dissatisfaction of Shen Nantang and Wu Ben, who had become the commander of the embroidered uniform guard. This position should have been theirs, but now it was given to an outsider. The grievance they felt was unspeakable, but it didn't mean that they couldn't do anything. For example, it was still possible for them to unite with their brothers and not cooperate with Qian Liang's work. No wonder they were brought up by Mao Mu. Both Shen Nantang and Wu Ben were generous people. They usually took care of their brothers in every possible way. If any brother's family was in trouble, they would help if they could and take money if they could. After all, as long as they followed Mao Mu, they would never be short of money. They could also intercept a lot of gray income, and only needed to report it to Mao Mu. Generous and loyal, the brothers under him would naturally submit to him. When Qian Liang found that no one was listening to him after working for a whole day, and everyone was patronizing him, he got angry. No matter what, he was still Qian Sengbao's nephew. He was taught by Qian Sungbao, so he still had some ability. At that moment, he thought of the method his uncle taught him. He wanted to rope in a group of people by himself to achieve the goal of fighting for the right to speak. However, the greedy Qian Liang was unwilling to spend money. When facing some of the embroidered uniform guard brothers who were on the sidelines and didn't have much ability, even if he went out to eat with them, they still had to pay. Gradually, after everyone knew Qian Liang's nature, in just a few days, everyone stopped paying attention to this commander. When you didn't get anything in return, who did you think you were, a fool? Qian Liang found that the brothers around him were getting fewer and fewer. When he was about to become a commander without an army, he finally felt powerless. He had no choice but to ask his uncle, Qian Sungbao, for help. Soon, Mao Mu received a message from a little eunuch sent by Qian Sungbao, asking to see him. In this period of time, Mao Mu had also cultivated a lot of trusted eunuchs. Among them, the most outstanding one was the eunuch called Zhu Tao. Under Mao Mu's intention, he was promoted to the position of deputy chief eunuch in the Empress Palace. Usually when he wasn't here, it was Zhu Tao who took care of all kinds of things. Godfather, eunuch Qian didn't come with good intentions. Zhu Tao's face was full of worry. When the little eunuch came to deliver the message, he happened to be present. Because of Mao Mu's trust, he also knew that Qian Liang had hit a wall in the embroidered uniform guard. Regarding this, Zhu Tao had always been worried. He meant to worship Qian Liang like a bodhisattva. No matter what, he was still eunuch Qian Sengbao's nephew. This kind of superficial work still had to be done. If it was in the past, Mao Mu could only do this. However, now that Kai Zhong had fallen from power, Chao Jixiang's power had been uprooted, and only Qian Sungbao was left. He really wasn't afraid of anything. At worst, everyone would fight. Speaking of which, he had a lot of evidence in his hands. Once he took it out, he was afraid that Qian Sungbao wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. That's right, little Taozi. You're right. This time, I'm afraid eunuch Qian will come to make things difficult for this eunuch. Mao Mu nodded. He agreed with this point of view, but he wasn't afraid. This was because taking down Qian Sungbao was originally one of his goals. Only in this way could he truly control the eunuch group. Only then could he reach the left and right harem, and even part of the imperial court's power, when Yang Xie launched an attack. In order to achieve this goal, Qian Sungbao must fall. With a goal, he had to do it. Mao Mu had been preparing for this. But at the same time, he was also very clear that after all, he had followed Zhu Qizhen for so many years and was called a companion. It wasn't so easy to take down Qian Sungbao. If he didn't do it well, he would be in trouble if he couldn't take down the other party. Therefore, he needed a bigger opportunity. Just last night, the group that contacted him had already sent the opportunity to him. The next problem was how to implement it. Now that Qian Sungbao asked him to go over, it was the right time to throw out the bait. He got up and walked calmly in the direction of Qinzheng Hall. Along the way, Mao Mu had already thought about how to face Qian Sungbao and how to answer when questioned. As expected, in the room where Qian Sungbao was resting, Qian Liang was standing beside him. When Mao Mu walked in, Qian Liang immediately had an arrogant look and didn't even look him in the eye. Mao Mu was like an old monk in meditation. He didn't have any reaction to all this. But when he came in front of Qian Sungbao, he bowed respectfully and looked like he was waiting for the emperor's orders. After all, Mao Mu was now the director of the genie guards, and was an acquaintance of the emperor and empress. Qian Sungbao couldn't be too arrogant. So he first squeezed out a smile and then said with a smile, "Eunuch Mao, you're here. Have a seat." "I don't dare. In front of eunuch Qian, how can I have a place?" Mao Mu replied very low-key. Ah. Qian Sungbao was very impressed with Mao Mu's attitude. Mao Mu was the kind of person who was very obedient. Basically, he would do whatever Qian Sungbao asked him to do. Not only that, but he was also very respectful every time they met. If it wasn't for the matter of his nephew, Qian Liang, he wouldn't be able to find any fault with him. It was precisely because Mao Mu had always been too low-key that Qian Sungbao was very unhappy when a problem arose. In his opinion, Mao Mu was clearly looking down on Qian Liang. That was equivalent to looking down on him. He really needed to give Mao Mu a beating. In Qian Sengbao's eyes, Mao Mu could be where he was today because of his recommendation. Otherwise, Mao Mu would only be a chief eunuch in the Empress Palace who didn't have much power. He was used to being complimented and couldn't stand the slightest bit of grievance. Qian Sungbao was such a person. So when Mao Mu stood firm, he expressed his displeasure. Eunuch Mao, this duke wants to ask, who exactly does the embroidered uniform guard listen to now? Is it still the embroidered uniform guard under the emperor's command? Why is it that the embroidered uniform guard doesn't listen to the words of the emperor's personal commander? As the director of their factory, shouldn't you say something? He was denouncing Mao Mu. Although he had already expected all of this, Mao Mu still pretended to be in fear and trepidation. His face was full of shock. How is this possible? Such a thing can't happen, right? It won't. Qian Liang, come and talk to eunuch Mao. Qian Sungbao looked like he didn't want to argue with Mao Mu. At this time, he had already begun to consider whether he should arrange for someone else to manage the genie guards and remove Mao Mu. When it was Qian Liang's turn to speak, he talked endlessly about what happened after he went to the genie guards. He added oil and vinegar. Qian Liang didn't have any other skills, but his eloquence was quite good. After he said this, it really seemed like he had suffered a great grievance. Qian Sungbao, who was listening at the side, was very angry. Even Mao Mu had an indignant look on his face as he roared. These people are too outrageous. They should all be captured and killed. Qian Sungbao and Qian Liang were dumbfounded by Mao Mu's roar. They didn't expect Mao Mu to have such a reaction. Shouldn't he be looking for reasons and making excuses? Why did he suddenly seem to be more angry than them? As for what he said, killing all the genie guards, this was something Qian Sungbao and Qian Liang didn't want to do. If they really killed them, who would do the work? Oh, the genie guards were doing well before. Now that Qian Liang was the commander, their work suddenly stopped. What would the emperor think? Even if he used his toes to think, he would know what was going on. Kill, we must kill them all. Since they don't respect the commander like this, killing them is not wrong. Eunuch Qian, I ask for an imperial edict to punish all the current genie guards. If it doesn't work, we'll kill more than half of them. This way, we'll see who dares to not listen to the commander's orders. Mao Mu didn't seem to be joking. Since he was going to ask for an imperial edict, he was serious. Chapter 1676. Of course, Qian Sungbao wouldn't agree. Although he was very angry that the embroidered uniform guards didn't obey his nephew's orders. But if he had to kill them all because of this, he would not do such a thing. Therefore, the person who should be condemning him became the one who comforted him. Ayaya, eunuch Mao, calm down, calm down. You can't do things like this. How can you fight and kill for no reason? Yes. I was too agitated. It's just that I really don't know about this matter. I've been taking care of the Empress for a while, and haven't been to the brocade guard's yamen. If you don't believe me, Commander Qian, think about it carefully. Have you seen me in the past few days? Mao Mu knew that he had the upper hand, so he stopped and asked Qian Liang. Qian Liang thought about it carefully and found that it was true. He immediately replied, that's right. I haven't seen eunuch Qian in the embroidered uniform guard these few days. That's right. It's all a misunderstanding. However, it doesn't matter. I'll go to the embroidered uniform guard and gather those brats. I'll give them a good lecture, and have Commander Qian give them a good lecture. What do you think, eunuch Qian? Mao Mu seemed to be speaking in a submissive tone. What could Qian Sungbao say when he had such a proper attitude? He could only nod and say, since it's a misunderstanding, I've wronged eunuch Mao. Then we'll do as you say. Thank you for your understanding, eunuch Qian. Mao Mu's body straightened at this moment. The atmosphere eased up a lot, and the three people all had smiles on their faces. Since the atmosphere eased, there was no need to be so serious. Mao Mu said, eunuch Qian, Commander Qian, it's not difficult to deal with these embroidered uniform guards. You can do it from two aspects. The first is to give them money. With benefits, everyone will be willing to follow you. As he spoke, Mao Mu was still observing Qian Sungbao and Qian Liang's reactions. Just as he thought, both of them had a serious look on their faces after listening to him. Obviously, for misers like them, It was more appropriate for others to give them money. Asking them to take out their money and hand it over to their subordinates was even more unbearable than killing them. Mao Mu then continued, "If we don't give them money, then we can only take the second path, which is to display enough ability to intimidate them. Coincidentally, there is a matter that His Majesty has instructed me to discuss the issue of grain with Yang Xie. If this matter is done well, this merit will be enough to intimidate others, and we won't have to worry about the brocade guards not being obedient." Listening to Mao Mu's words, Qianliang originally wanted to say that his ability was mediocre. It was too difficult to prove to others with his ability. But before he could say anything, he heard about the problem of food. He couldn't help but open his ears wide. At this moment, Qian Sengbao's expression turned serious. His intuition told him that this matter of food could be done. After all, it was part of the procurement process. As long as one was a eunuch in the palace or an official in the imperial court, who wouldn't know that when it came to procurement, there were always benefits to be gained. "Eunuch Mao, what exactly is going on? Tell me about it." Qian Sengbao took this to heart. When he asked about Mao Mu, his attitude became much more amiable. Mao Mu, who had been waiting for this sentence, explained the task that His Majesty had instructed him to do in detail. It turned out that ever since Yang Xie was assassinated in the capital and the imperial edict in Chao Jixiang's hands, although Yang Xie didn't declare war on the southern Ming Empire, he had been preparing for it. It was said that there were many official ships that went from Qiqian City to Laizhou Prefecture every day, transporting all kinds of supplies before the war. Of course, the southern Ming Empire wasn't idle either. The Ministry of War began to deploy troops, and the Ministry of Revenue began to prepare money and food. Here came the problem. In the past few years, because Yang Xie had poured large amounts of food into the southern Ming Empire, and the price was very reasonable, it heavily suppressed the local food industry. As a result, the more land the farmers planted, the more losses they suffered. Gradually, large amounts of land began to become barren, and the southern Ming Empire no longer had the ability to produce their own food. Now that they were about to go to war with Yang Xie naturally didn't want to sell food to the southern Ming Empire. Although in the past 2 years, the officials of the southern Ming Empire had seen through the problem and increased the amount of food they bought, and they had accumulated some food. However, if they only sent out and didn't receive any food, they wouldn't be able to last for long. For the southern Ming Empire that was about to go to war, this was an extremely dangerous matter. The emperor saw the problem and handed the matter to the embroidered uniform guards, telling them to discuss with the officials of Yang Xie about the matter of purchasing food. After all, the two sides hadn't declared war yet, right? Moreover, in the previous negotiations, it was agreed that the southern Ming Empire could continue to buy food, but the price would be raised by 30%. A 30% price increase was still acceptable to the southern Ming Empire. What they were afraid of was that the Yang Xie wouldn't sell food. That would be the worst-case scenario. Regarding this matter, we also sent people to discuss with the officials of Yang Xie. The other party also revealed a certain amount of information. It's not that they don't want to sell food. After all, the Yang Xie boasted that they wanted to bring the Han people to the peak of the world. The southern Ming Empire is full of Han people, and they can't just watch the people starve to death. However, they still want to raise the price. This is something that the emperor can't accept. Our embroidered uniform guards are responsible for buying food at a 30% price increase to prepare for war. Mao Mu said a lot in one breath. After he finished speaking, he closed his mouth and looked at Qian Sengbao and his nephew's performance. The matter was already very clear, and Qian Sengbao was also thinking in his heart. If this was the case, this was indeed a good job. Once he could buy a lot of food, the emperor would definitely be happy. Then he would be able to obtain merit. However, the problem was that it wasn't easy to talk about the price of food. Thus, he asked the crucial question. "Eunuch Mao, does the emperor mean that there's a possibility of the price increasing?" The emperor naturally hopes that it will be as low as possible. However, the food is now in the hands of others. Of course, it's not up to us to decide. If it must increase, then we can only accept it. Mao Mu spread out his hands, and there was a hint of helplessness on his face. This meant that there was room for fluctuation. This way, not only could this task be completed, there might even be a lot of profit in the process. Qian Sengbao's eyes lit up. He had already decided to accept this task for his nephew. When he looked at Mao Mu, he didn't blame him at all. Not only that, his eyes were filled with admiration. It seemed that he had really wronged him before. If Mao Mu really didn't want Qian Liang to be the commander, then why would he mention such an important task? When he thought about how he had wronged him, a trace of guilt flashed across Qian Sengbao's face. He then said, "Eunuch Mao, it was indeed a misunderstanding. I have wronged you. How about this? Qian Liang will accept this task. When you return, please hand over the relevant matters. What do you think?" Everything will be done according to Eunuch Qian's wishes. Mao Mu pretended to hesitate for a moment, then agreed. As for whether the other party would gain merit because of this, sorry, this was originally a trap. Qian Liang was willing to fall into it, so he couldn't blame others. Mao Mu was politely sent away. Qian Sengbao and his nephew Qian Liang went into a secret meeting. Because of the big trouble, Qian Sengbao even called the eunuch, Songda, to help Qian Liang. After that, he repeatedly reminded Songda that the matter must be done well, so that he could show his face in front of the emperor. After Qian Liang received a good task, he was naturally very excited. Soon, he brought Songda out of the palace and went straight to Yang Xie's office in the capital. In the office, a young official, Wang Tongsheng, who was only 24 years old, was already waiting for Qian Liang to visit. Wang Tongsheng, a student of the 6th batch of Yang Xie Academy in Crimson City. When he graduated, he was ranked first in all aspects and caught the eye of Yang Qindong. First, he was sent to the city lord's mansion and started from a small position. His work ability was once recognized by city lord Yu Qian. After that, he was trained by Yang Qindong. This time, he was sent to southern Ming to cooperate with Mao Mu to seize power. As a student of the Yang Family Academy, there was no need to talk about their ability. More importantly, they were loyal to their leader, Yang Qindong. In the eyes of these students, without Yang Qindong, they wouldn't have everything they had now. In addition, in ancient times, students were very respectful to their teachers. If anyone dared to violate them, they would not be tolerated by this society. This kind of student was naturally worthy of trust. Wang Tongsheng was a person who was trusted. Before he came, Yang Qindong specially called him over to give him some instructions. He was very clear about the task this time. Therefore, when he heard that someone in the office reported that the commander of the Southern Ming Brocade Guards, Qian Liang, had come to visit, a smile flashed across his face. The fish had taken the bait. Not only Qian Liang, but many well-informed people from the Southern Ming Empire also knew of Yang Xi's strength. Unknowingly, they had developed the thought of being inferior to him. Therefore, as soon as he entered the office, Qian Liang put away his arrogance and became cautious. He even smiled at everyone he met. For someone like Qian Liang, if he was born during the anti-Japanese war, he would be a complete traitor. After being led to a room, Qian Liang saw Wang Tongsheng. However, it was different from what he imagined. Wang Tongsheng immediately asked greedily, "Commander Qian, right? Such an important position must be very rich. This is the first time we meet. Do you have any greeting gift?" Qian Liang had never experienced such a thing. The moment they met, they immediately asked for money. Even the most savage and unscrupulous group of eunuchs in his eyes didn't seem to do things so blatantly. For a moment he was stunned. Qian Liang didn't respond. Wang Tongsheng was very angry. He waved his hand and said, "Since you didn't prepare a greeting gift, you can go back. This official is tired today. We can talk about the food another day." Chapter 1677. I don't want it. Seeing that Wang Tongsheng was angry, Qian Liang immediately reacted. He stretched out his hand and said to Songda, "Quick, do you have anything good on you? Take it out quickly." Songda's face was bitter, but he did not dare to offend Qian Liang. He could only take out a small pendant from his waist. When he was serving Zhu Qizhen, the emperor was in a good mood and gave it to him. He treated it as a family heirloom. When the small pendant was taken out, it was snatched away by Qian Liang. He then presented it to Wang Tongsheng with a flattering expression. Sir, do you like it? This is a pendant given to eunuchs by the emperor. It's all good stuff. Not bad, not bad. Wang Tongsheng took the pendant and looked at it. It was indeed a good piece of jade. Wang Tongsheng nodded with satisfaction. He then smiled and introduced himself to Qianliang. He said that he was the person in charge of negotiating the grain price with the Southern Ming Empire. Since the person in charge was in front of him, Qianliang felt relieved. Both sides sat together and began to discuss. Things weren't as complicated as Qianliang thought. The Yang faction didn't have any intention of not selling grain to the Southern Ming Empire. According to Wang Tongsheng's introduction, the Yang faction was now vigorously reclaiming wastelands and developing agriculture. Now they had so much grain that they couldn't finish it. Although they had built many granaries, they still couldn't store the grain. If this continued for a long time, there was a possibility that the grain would rot. This was also why the two sides were discussing the issue of grain sales when they were about to go to war. Hearing this, Qianliang's eyes lit up. He felt that he had met a wooden club. This kind of confidential matter should not be easily announced. Now that the other party had told him everything, wasn't that the same as revealing the bottom line in advance? Wang Tongsheng did not seem to have this awareness. He continued, "Of course we can sell the grain to you. The key is the problem of price. Sai, to be honest, as a Yangxie official, it is hard. You don't know. Although we seem to be treated well, there are too many people relying on me. I pity my wife and 6 concubines. How am I going to feed them?" As they chatted, Wang Tongsheng began to talk about his own difficulties. Qianliang was stunned when he heard this. He didn't understand. How many concubines you have and how many people you need to feed is none of my business. Is there any meaning in telling me these things? On the other hand, Songda, who came along with Qianliang, was a smart person. He saw something and immediately pulled Qianliang, who was still in a daze, and then whispered something. Wang Tongsheng saw these small actions, but he didn't stop them. Instead, he picked up his teacup and drank his tea as if he didn't see them. After Songda bit Qianliang's ear for a while, he quickly revealed a look of realization. He nodded, and when he looked at Wang Tongsheng, he asked in a probing tone, "Lord Wang, I understand what you mean. You can rest assured that once this matter is settled, you will be rewarded handsomely. But how much do you think is suitable for this price?" "Ha ha ha, Lord Qian is a smart man. Since that's the case, the price is easy to negotiate. You can set any price, but it can't be lower than the original price. It can't be more than 30% of the original price. Of course, the higher the price, the more manipulative it will be, and the more benefits we will receive." When he heard that it was only 30% of the original price, Qianliang was naturally overjoyed. He opened his mouth and wanted to agree, but when he heard that the higher the price, the more benefits he would receive, he immediately shut his mouth and his mind began to wander. At the end of the day, there was nothing more practical than money. Money was the only thing that could be relied on, and could save a life at a critical moment. As long as he had a large amount of money, so what if he didn't want to be a commander? He could be a rich man and enjoy life, couldn't he? The temptation of the silver made Qianliang's eyes light up, but he still carefully asked, "Lord Wang, if that's the case, what if we double the original price of the unit price? But how much can we gain from this?" It wasn't a 30% increase, but a 100% increase. This way, there would be a lot of manipulation in the middle. Of course, the Southern Ming Empire would have to pay a great price for this. But who cares? The Southern Ming Empire belonged to the imperial court, the Zhu clan, and Zhu Qizhen. It didn't belong to the 3 of them, so why would they care so much? Double the original price, this price is not bad. Wang Tongsheng was very satisfied when he heard this. After thinking for a while, he said, "Then this official will report to Yangxie that the price has been increased by 50%. This way, this official will be able to account for it. This way, there will be 50% of the profits, enough for us to split, hee. Ha ha ha, very good, very good." Qianliang laughed heartily when he heard that there would be at least 25% of the profits. Neither side had expected the matter to progress so smoothly. However, they were both greedy people. What they cared about was getting the money in the bag. In order to get the silver as soon as possible without any accidents, Qianliang stood and said, "In that case, I will report this matter to the court. I think there will be news soon." "Good, then I'll have to trouble Lord Qian. This official will wait here for your good news." Wang Tongxing also stood up with a satisfied smile on his face. When he saw that Qianliang and Songda were about to leave, he didn't forget to add, "Next time, don't forget to bring a greeting gift." This caused Qianliang and Songda to stagger and almost fall to the ground. At almost the same time, a word appeared in their minds, corrupt official. Because of this, the two of them trusted Wang Tongxing even more, because only such a corrupt official would do something that harmed the Yangxie, such as selling Yangxie's grain to the Southern Ming Empire at a low price. This gave them the opportunity to earn a large sum of money from the difference in price. Qianliang and Songda left. They didn't know that when they walked out of Yangxie's office, the greedy Wang Tongxing behind them had already returned to his original appearance. His expression was calm, and his eyes were spirited. He didn't look like a greedy official at all. The two of them quickly returned to the imperial palace, and saw Qian Sengbao and eunuch Zhang Chun who was serving him. Seeing that there were no outsiders, the two of them gave a detailed report of their meeting. They reported that Wang Tongxing had asked for a greeting gift the moment they met, and reminded them to bring a greeting gift the next time they met. When Qian Sengbao heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. This Bugnam of Gojoseon, he's good at fighting and is also an excellent commander. However, when it comes to managing officials, he really isn't that good. However, this is also good. Otherwise, how can we earn money from this? Seeing that Qian Sengbao seemed to have agreed, Qianliang went forward and said, "Uncle, this matter can be done. However, isn't doubling the original price a bit too much?" "Not much, not much." Qian Sengbao shook his head and said, "You don't understand the emperor's heart. What the emperor wants is to be able to buy grain and have enough war reserves. Besides, buying grain isn't a long-term plan. Didn't you see that the imperial court has already started preparing for spring? In the future, our land will also be able to grow grain, and we won't need to buy from Yangxie. Therefore, we have to seize the opportunity in front of us to make a fortune. Otherwise, we don't know when we will have such an opportunity." Qian Sengbao was Zhu Qizhen's chief eunuch, so he naturally knew more. He also understood Zhu Qizhen's thoughts better than others. When Qian Sengbao said this, Qianliang's eyes lit up as he said, "Uncle, since this is the case, then nephew should write a report?" "Yes, immediately write a report. Remember, you have to write down how you tried to persuade Yangxie's officials. This is a good opportunity for you to make a name for yourself." Qian Sengbao instructed. Qianliang nodded continuously. "Uncle, don't worry. Nephew knows what to do. Oh right, of the 25% profit, 15% is to be filial to uncle. All these years, uncle has taken care of nephew so much. Nephew is very grateful." Seeing Qianliang being so tactful, Qian Sengbao laughed in satisfaction. Then he patted Qianliang's shoulder and said, "Well said, well said. Actually, uncle is old and won't live for long. In the future, uncle's money will be left to you. Haha. Yes, yes." This scene of uncle and nephew being harmonious was seen by Songda and Zhang Chun. The two of them were envious. Why didn't they have such a good uncle? Qianliang was a man of action. He quickly finished writing the report, and even found a literate eunuch to polish it. Then Qian Sengbao personally delivered it to Zhu Qizhen. Hearing that the matter of grain was settled, Zhu Qizhen was very happy. When he received the report, he sighed and said, "My wife is my beloved official. My wife's nephew is also not bad. Truly a family of two." Receiving such praise, Qian Sengbao was very excited. However, his eyebrows didn't move at all. Instead, he said seriously, "Everything this subject has is given to me by the emperor. It is my duty to work for the emperor. I don't dare to be greedy." Good. Seeing Qian Sengbao's neither arrogant nor impatient appearance, Zhu Qizhen was even happier. He opened the report and read it. Then his expression became more serious. He said with displeasure, "Why is the price so expensive? Our financial pressure is too great." Knowing that Zhu Qizhen would say this, Qian Xingbao quickly explained. Your Majesty, there is nothing we can do about it. After all, we are going to war with the Yangxie. As two people who are going to be enemies, it is already very difficult for them to sell grain to us. This is also because Qianliang used the reason that the Han people of the southern Ming dynasty don't have any grain to eat. If we use this as military grain, I'm afraid that the other side won't sell it to us even if we give them mountains of gold and silver. Chapter 1678. That makes sense. Since that's the case, let's talk about it. But remember, you must buy more. No one knows how long this war will last. We must make more preparations. Zhu Qizhen felt that Qian Senbao's words were reasonable and nodded in agreement. Since Zhu Qizhen agreed, Qian Senbao's heart could be at ease. After leaving Qinzheng Hall, he called Qianliang and Songde and told them to immediately go to Yang Xie's office to settle the matter, so as to avoid any problems or the other party increasing the price. Then he took out a jade ruby that the emperor had bestowed to him and said, "This is a meeting gift for Sir Wang. You must handle this matter well." "Uncle, please rest assured. Please rest assured, Qian Gonggong." Qianliang and Songde agreed with a smile. After receiving the jade ruby, they quickly made preparations and left the palace. In Yang Xie's office, Qianliang once again met Wang Tongsheng. When he took out the jade ruby, the other party was clearly very satisfied. The following conversation went even more smoothly. In the end, they settled on an agreement to buy 10 million share of grain first. The salary of the Great Ming Dynasty's officials was very low. The 7th-ranked county magistrate of the Ming Dynasty only had an annual income of 90 share, which was less than 200 taels of silver. They also had to feed a large number of people. In order to dominate the entire southern Ming Dynasty's market, Yang Xie sold grain at a very low price. 1 share, about 120 caddies, was originally sold for 2 taels of silver by Yang Xie. Now it was 4 taels of silver. 10 million share was 40 million taels of silver. The actual payment to Yang Xie was only 30 million taels of silver. The uncle and nephew of the Qian family earned 5 million taels of silver. After the agreement was settled, Yang Xie's office began to transport the grain. Qianliang said that the next time they met, he would bring money and make preparations to receive the grain. Both sides happily parted, but Wang Tongsheng still didn't forget to say that the next time they came, they had to bring a meeting gift. This made Qianliang extremely angry. After this transaction, the other party could earn 5 million taels of silver. Wasn't that enough? They even wanted a meeting gift. They were even more greedy than him. After watching Qianliang and Songde leave in a hurry, Wang Tongsheng said to one of his followers with a smile on his face, "Go and spread the news. The matter is done. We can start now." "Yes, sir." The follower replied and quickly left. Not long after, Mao Mu received news from the liaison team that they could take action. He rubbed his hands together and said to eunuch Zhu Hai, "Little Hai, let's act according to plan." "Yes, eunuch Mao." Zhu Hai's heart thumped wildly. As Mao Mu's trusted eunuch, he already knew that his father-in-law wanted to deal with Qian Xingbao. Previously, his heart had been hanging in the air because he knew what would happen if he failed in such a battle. However, in order to obtain more power, they had no choice but to fight. Fortunately, his master's plan was meticulous. Now that he saw that most of the matter had been accomplished, he could finally rest assured and get to work. Half a day after Zhu Hai left, a rumor began to circulate in Jingdou. If an official wanted to protect himself, it was useless to find a monk to protect him. Mao Mu of the Brocade Guard was the one who had the final say. As soon as the news came out, many officials became nervous. They had just sent a large sum of silver to Monk Qian not long ago. Now that he said it was useless, they had to get the money back and transfer it to Mao Mu. But after all, it was just a rumor and had not been confirmed. Everyone wanted to continue observing and not be confused by this news without a source. What happened next did not need them to linger around. The Brocade Guard suddenly came to the manor of the Ministry of Justice's censor, He Xingqiao, and took him away. He Xingqiao's sudden arrest made everyone's hair stand on end. A few days ago, when everyone was drinking together, He Xingqiao, who had drunk a little too much, said that he had sent 50,000 taels of silver to Monk Qian. However, he had now been taken away by the brocade guard. Did this not prove that the rumor was true? No one wanted to be the next person to be taken away. After a discussion, the officials chose a few representatives to enter the palace to see Monk Qian. Since your words no longer have any effect on the brocade guard, you should return the silver we sent, and we will send it to eunuch Mao Mu. In short, we don't care how you fight, but don't encroach on our power. One official was not scary. What was scary was dozens of officials gathered together. Even Zhu Qizhen would have a headache dealing with this force. Zhu Qizhen did not know about this at this time. He was listening to Mao Mu's secret report. Since it was a secret report, of course he would not let more people be present. Especially when he heard that this secret report was related to his partner, Monk Qian. All the eunuchs in the Qinzheng Hall were driven out. Only 2 eunuchs, Mao Mu and Zhang Chun, were left. Zhang Chun, the eunuch who was regarded as Monk Qian's confidant, had another identity. He was Mao Mu's spy. There was nothing in the world that money could not solve. If it could not be solved, then money would be added. Zhang Chun had been bought over by Mao Mu long ago. That was when Zhang Chun was just a little eunuch. He entered the palace because his family was poor. Once he was accidentally discovered by Mao Mu. That day he happened to go out to buy silk for the empress. He saw Zhang Chen's father saying something at the palace gate. At that time, Zhang Chen's face was full of tears. With the idea of making more good karma, Mao Mu walked forward and learned that Zhang Chen's mother was seriously ill and urgently needed money. Zhang Chen's father really had no choice. Only then did he think of his son in the palace who was no longer a healthy person. But at that time, Zhang Chen was just the lowest level eunuch. He had no power, no influence, and no extra money. It was not easy to get some monthly allowance, but it was deducted by the eunuchs. There was not much left. Mao Mu took out 100 taels of silver at one time. Zhang Chen was so grateful that he wanted to kneel down on the spot. From then on, Zhang Chen became Mao Mu's man. However, because his level was too low, and Mao Mu was very low-key at that time, no one noticed this matter. From then on, Mao Mu kept giving Zhang Chen money. Zhang Chen was also a smart and capable person. Step by step, he became Qian Sengbao's right-hand man, and became his right-hand man. Mao Mu brought Zhang Chen to Zhu Qizhen to report to him about the food. When Zhang Chen knelt on the ground and told Zhu Qizhen everything he heard from Qian Sengbao, Zhu Qizhen's face was gloomy. He admired Qian Sengbao very much. He felt that Qian Sengbao's words and actions were in line with his temperament. Therefore, he kept him by his side and treated him as an existence like Wang Zhen. Wang Zhen grew up with Zhu Qizhen. Otherwise, he would not be called Zhu Qizhen's partner. In contrast, Qian Sengbao came to Zhu Qizhen's side later. The reason why he was called Zhu Qizhen's partner was a kind of commemoration. It showed that the emperor did not forget Wang Zhen in his heart. In fact, they were not at the same level at all. If Wang Zhen did something out of line, Zhu Qizhen would at most punish him verbally. After that, he would still be in an important position. But if it was Qian Sengbao, then it would be different. This was someone who could be replaced. After all, he was here to replace Wang Zhen. When he heard that Qian Sengbao, his most trusted eunuch, actually extended his hand into the food business and caused the southern Ming Empire to lose 10 million taels of silver in one go, Zhu Qizhen had already sentenced him to death in his heart. Zhu Qizhen could tolerate Qian Sengbao's small mistakes, such as accepting bribes from some officials. But when it came to major issues, he absolutely could not tolerate it. Beloved Minister Mao, is this true? Zhu Qizhen still maintained a trace of calmness in his mind. He knew that he could not only listen to one side of the story. It is true. Reporting to your majesty, after this subject found out about this matter. This subject has already done an investigation and sent people to question that official from the Yang family. This is the other party's testimony. As Mao Mu spoke, he handed over another memorial, which recorded Wang Tongxing's testimony. The southern Ming Empire's officials naturally could not do anything to Yang Xie's officials. However, Mao Mu was different. He was originally Yang Qindong's person. Wang Tongxing's mission was to cooperate with him. This time, he would naturally betray Qian Liang and the others. Zhu Qizhen reached out and took the memorial. After reading it, he was burning with anger. He sternly said, "Someone come bring Qian Songbao over to Zhen." As soon as the decree was issued, a small eunuch came over and knelt on the ground, trembling as he said, "Your Majesty, there are many officials outside. They are all looking for Qian Fengbao. They said that Qian Fengbao accepted the money but did not do anything. They are clamoring for a refund." What happened? Zhu Qizhen was stunned when he heard this. His gaze naturally fell on Mao Mu, who was standing there with a calm expression. "Reporting to your Majesty, something must have happened because Qian Fengbao accepted the money from those officials. Your Majesty, Qian Fengbao had already informed this subject before. However, the problem is that Qian Fengbao wanted to protect too many people. Many of them are problematic officials. They said very negative things in private. They said that our southern Ming Empire is not a match for Yangxie. If we must go to war, it would be like smashing an egg against a rock. There were also some who persuaded our southern Ming Empire to submit to Yangxie. It is absolutely impossible to not capture such people. Otherwise, there will be a big problem. Qian Fengbao still wanted to protect them. This subject was also in a difficult position. However, considering the imperial court and our southern Ming Empire, this subject still sent people to capture them. There was no need to say anything more. Zhu Qizhen had already figured out the whole story. He really did not expect that Qian Fengbao, who had always seemed very loyal, would become like this. He actually wanted to affect the southern Ming Empire's plan with his own strength. He even won over so many officials. The most important thing was that the other party came knocking on his door. It was truly a display of incompetence and greed. There was no need to use such a person anymore. There was also no need to leave any face. Chapter 1679. Originally, he wanted to reprimand him to see if he had a chance to change. But after the official made such a fuss, Zhu Qizhen gave up all his fantasies. Beloved official Mao, arrest him. This subject obeys. Mao Mu showed a trace of hesitation. Of course, he wouldn't plead for Qian Songbao, but he still had to act. After all, everyone knew that he was where he was today because of Qian Songbao's help. This trace of hesitation was seen by Zhu Qizhen. He sighed in his heart at Mao Mu's benevolence and said, "All right, we know what you want to say. But Qian Songbao's crime cannot be forgiven. You don't need to say any more. Go." Yes. Mao Mu knew that he had done what he needed to do. The next step was to uproot Qian's faction. Without Qian Songbao, the entire group of eunuchs would be in his hands. This way he could finally play a role in helping Yang Qindong. Think about it, with the help of these eunuchs, how could any of Nanming's actions escape Mao Mu's eyes? It meant that everything Nanming did would be known by Yang Qindong and Yang Xie. How could this battle continue? Qian Songbao was arrested. Qianliang, Songda, and the others were also arrested. When a large group of embroidered uniform guards appeared in front of them, Qianliang shouted loudly, "Are your dog eyes blind? Don't you know that I'm the commander?" Qianliang, who still wanted to show off, was met with a series of punches and kicks. He completely became obedient. As for Qian Songbao, he shouted loudly that he wanted to see the emperor, but no one paid attention to him. He was tied up and brought to the embroidered uniform guards' prison. In the prison, Qian Songbao finally saw Mao Mu. Different from before, one was a prisoner, and the other was an official. When he saw Mao Mu appear, Qian Songbao changed his decadent appearance and threw himself on the iron bars in front of the cage. "Eunuch Mao, quickly go see the emperor. Tell him that this official has something to say. This subject is innocent." At this time, Qian Songbao still had a commanding tone, which really made Mao Mu unhappy. At this time he didn't need to lower his head like before. He changed his attitude and raised his head. "What? Eunuch Qian still think that the emperor wants to see you at this time? Think about all the wrong things you've done. His Majesty has been accommodating you again and again, but how did you repay him? You embezzled 5 million taels of grain. You really have a big heart." After a round of sarcasm, Qian Songbao, he roared, I know, it was all you, it was you to me. You were the one who instigated me to take on this matter. Goody. How? Looking at Qian Sungbao, who finally understood everything, Mao Mu only shook his head. A defeated general was no longer worth him wasting any effort on this person. She reached into her bosom and took out a piece of white silk and threw it into the prison. The emperor said that since you have served him for so many years, he will give eunuch Qian a dignified death. Kill yourself. Finishing, Mao Mu turned and left. Ignoring Qian Sengbao's angry shouts and pleas, he headed in the other direction of the prison. Wang Zhuo, Chun Sun, and the other court officials were locked up there. After these officials were captured and sent to the discipline prison, they really didn't suffer much. They were arranged to be in a clean single room. Every day they were fed well. There was paper, ink, and brush in front of them. On the surface, it was for them to report their problems, but on the surface it was for them to practice calligraphy. After all, there was no entertainment in prison. Practicing calligraphy could calm the mind. Although Mao Mu had come a few times before, he had never had a deep conversation. At that time his position was not stable. Now it was different. The chief eunuchs who were older than him had been taken down one by one. The remaining eunuchs were tactfully under him. He could finally do what he wanted in prison. He didn't need to be afraid of others spying on him or reporting him. The first to arrive was Wang Zuo's room. When the embroidered uniform guard opened the door, Wang Zuo was practicing calligraphy. He didn't seem to have any intention of stopping when he saw Mao Mu arrive. He had a feeling that Mao Mu was different from the other eunuchs. However, before the other party revealed his intentions, he wouldn't say anything. This one greets official Wang. When there was no one else in the prison, Mao Mu immediately gave a junior's greeting. Wang Zuo finally put down the brush in his hand. He turned around and said, "Why is eunuch Mao doing this? Right now you are an official and I am a prisoner. There is no need for such formalities." "No, official Wang is not a prisoner. You are not guilty. The reason why you were brought here is because I don't want you to work for the Southern Ming Empire. This is all Bugnam of Gojoseon's intention." Mao Mu finally decided to speak the truth. He also believed that at this time, Wang Zuo should know what to do. As expected, when he said this, Wang Zuo was stunned. After a long while he sighed and said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon really has good methods. He even has his hands in the palace. Hee, if this old man's guess is correct, eunuch Mao should have the final say in the palace." As official Wang thinks, the stones that should be moved have been moved. Right now, this subject's words still have some weight in the palace. Mao Mu replied modestly, "Hee, amazing, amazing." Wang Zuo sighed. When he looked at Mao Mu, his attitude became more serious. However, what ability did this old man have to make Bugnam of Gojoseon calculate and arrange things like this? In fact, even if this old man was in court, the Southern Ming Empire wouldn't be a match for Bugnam of Gojoseon. This is different. Mao Mu shook his head. Bugnam of Gojoseon wants to lead the Han people to the peak of the world. If the Yangxie and the Southern Ming Empire really fight, it will only benefit the other foreign races. This is why this kind of plan is made. I hope official Wang can understand. I understand. Wang Zuo said emotionally. Bugnam of Gojoseon's goal is to do so much for the Han people. It really makes me blush with shame. Speaking of which, this old man is about to enter the ground. If there is something I can do for our people before I pass away, it is also my wish. This meant that he was going to help. Mao Mu was waiting for this result. He immediately said happily, "If Bugnam of Gojoseon knows of official Wang's choice, he will definitely be very gratified and grateful." Haha, this old man doesn't dare to accept this. Bugnam of Gojoseon should be the one receiving the gratitude of all the Han people. Alright, since it's like this, I hope eunuch Mao can wait a moment. I will write a few letters and trouble you to send them over. They are all this old man's students. They won't dare to disobey this old man's words. Please start writing, official Wang. This little one will be honored to grind ink for official Wang. Mao Mu also didn't expect things to go so smoothly. In fact, for an old official like Wang Zuo, he had seen many wonderful things in his life. He was used to seeing the change of imperial power, the internal strife between officials, and the suffering of the common people. Now that there was finally someone who could change everything. How could they not help? Moreover, these days in prison had already made them understand that since the emperor didn't trust them, there was no need for them to risk their lives for him. It was better to go with the flow. Of course, there was another important reason. Yang Chendong definitely knew what they were doing now. Even if they couldn't enjoy this kindness, they still had children and grandchildren who could be taken care of. In this way, everything they did now would be worth it. Mao Mu grinded ink. Wang Zhou personally wrote more than 10 secret letters. This meant that there were at least 10 officials in the court who would stand on Yang Xie's side in the battle between Yang Xie and the Southern Ming Dynasty. There were many Southern Ming officials who were arrested in prison. One could imagine what kind of consequences it would cause. The situation in the Southern Ming Dynasty finally stabilized. Mao Mu took over and controlled the entire group of eunuchs. His subordinate, Zhang Chun, became the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. His subordinate, Zhu Hai, became the eunuch in charge of the emperor's daily care. With the help of these people and the embroidered uniform guards in his hands, it was guaranteed that if there were any big movements, Yang Chendong would be the first to know. In Qiqian City, Baiming's observer group had also left and returned. Because Hu Xiao was old and couldn't bear the pain of the bumpy journey, he was left in Qiqian City. Queen Hu Yan found a large house outside the palace. When she missed her grandfather, she could go and see him at any time to relieve the pain of homesickness. During this time, Yang Chendong met with the representatives of Baiming's observer group. Among them was the leader of the observer group, the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Scholar and Minister of Justice Su Yozhen. Speaking of Su Yozhen, his fate was completely changed by Yang Chendong. In history, he made a great contribution in saving Zhu Qizhen. Later, he rebelled and was killed. Now he was still alive and well. Not only that, but he also became the teacher of Zhu Qiyu's only son, Zhu Jianji. More importantly, Su Yozhen was Yang Chendong's subordinate. This allowed him to maintain an excellent state of mind in the upcoming battle between Baiming and Yang Xie. Su Yozhen was secretly brought to a small courtyard by Yang Chendong at night. His identity couldn't be exposed yet. Under the guidance of the Black Knight Dragon Guard, Su Yozhen saw Yang Chendong in the small courtyard, who was singing to the moon. She quickly walked a few steps forward. When he got close, he knelt on the ground with a thud. Minister Su Yozhen greets the king. Haha, please rise. Yang Chendong helped Su Yozhen up with a smile on his face. He looked like a group of ministers who were enjoying each other's company. Very few people knew the contents of the meeting. Even the Black Cavalry didn't know the details. They only knew that when Su Yozhen was about to leave, he had a satisfied smile on his face. Baiming's observer group finally left. What they saw and heard in Qiqian City would slowly ferment over time. Yang Chendong didn't care anymore, because he was preparing to attack the Southern Ming Empire. Chapter 1680. Zhu Qizhen actually dared to let Chao Jixiang work with Yang Chendong to deal with him, and even created an imperial edict to confer the title of the new Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was equivalent to creating an excellent excuse for Yang Chendong to attack the Southern Ming Empire. He originally thought that it would take some time before he had to mobilize his troops. Everything was brought forward because of this accident. In the third month of 1468 AD, 2 months after the Southern Ming observation group returned, Yang Xie advanced from Guangxi to Guangdong in the name of cleaning up the emperor. The battle was about to begin. Yang Xie sent out the 1st Cavalry Division, the New Army, the 3rd Army, the 2nd, 4th and 5th Divisions of the Lung Vanguard, as well as the 1st, Ming 2nd, and Ming 3rd Divisions of the Russian Empire. Close to 300,000 troops were split into 3 directions: Guangdong, Hubei, and Jiangxi. The 1st Cavalry Division, the 5th Division of the Lung Vanguard, and the 3rd Division of the Ming 3rd Division of the Jiangxi Vanguard, the New Army, the 4th Division of the Lung Vanguard, and the 2nd Division of the Ming 3rd Division of the Russian Empire went to Hubei. The 300,000 troops moved out with great momentum, causing Guangdong, Hubei, and Jiangxi to be in a state of emergency. Southern Ming capital, Yingtian Prefecture. Kuang Yi, who was already over 80 years old, dragged his sickly body into the palace to meet the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen. Ever since he returned from Qiqian City, Kwang Yi had been sick. After all, he was old and no longer as brave as he used to be. This old man who should have died in the wooden fortress had his fate changed by Yang Chendong. However, he was finally at the end of his life. Give him a seat. Seeing Kwang Yi trembling as he walked into the hall, Zhu Qizhen shouted from the bottom of his heart. Eunuch Zhu Hai hurriedly complied, and directed the other eunuchs to bring over a wooden chair with a very thick cushion on it. He then helped Kwang Yi sit on it. After tossing and turning, Kwang Yi's face was slightly red, which was caused by his anger. It seemed that his body really couldn't take it anymore. This old subject has come to see Your Majesty to ask on behalf of the officials of the Ministry of War whether the food and military equipment have been properly prepared, and whether the soldiers are sufficient. Kwang Yi took a long while to finish his words. Minister Kwang, the food and weapons have been prepared. It's just that the issue of the source of soldiers is still a little troublesome. I'm afraid it'll take some time. Zhu Qizhen's voice had a trace of fear in it as he spoke. There was nothing they could do about it. The influence of the members of the observer group was too great. Under their influence, it seemed that everyone knew that Yang Xie was extraordinarily powerful. They all knew that if they were to fight with them, they would lose more than they would win. As a result, many young people were unwilling to join the army. After receiving the news, Zhu Qizhen had no choice but to give the order to capture able-bodied men. But even so, the effect was still not good. Many young people ran away from home and hid in the nearby homes. This made it difficult for the supply of reinforcements to arrive. Kwang Yi had been bedridden at home for a while, so he wasn't clear about the matters of the court. When he heard that the army wasn't fully prepared, he couldn't help but anxiously say, Your Majesty, this can't be sloppy. Yang Xie is extremely powerful. In addition, they have countless experienced veterans. Even if we were to fight them one by one, we would still be at a disadvantage. If we don't have enough soldiers, we won't be able to suppress them with numbers. I'm afraid that it will be even more difficult to obtain victory. Yes, Minister Kwang's words, we understand. You should go back and recuperate first. Once you're well, we still need to put you in an important position. Zhu Qizhen didn't want to tell Kwang Yi about the difficulties of the court. First, it was useless. Second, it would only add to his worries. Since it was like this, it was better not to say anything. Seeing that the emperor had agreed, Kwang Yi couldn't force him too much. Trembling, he stood up and took his leave. After leaving Qinzheng Hall, he didn't go home. Instead, he went straight to the Ministry of Personnel's Yamen. He wanted to see Minister Chen Sun and have a good talk with him. He wanted him to send capable people to take charge of the recruitment of soldiers. Because he had been kept in the dark by his family, Kwang Yi didn't know that Chen Sun had long been arrested by the embroidered uniform guards. When he arrived at the Ministry of Personnel and saw that the new minister Chao Jie had come to greet him, he had a puzzled expression. He knew this Chao Jie. He had always worked in the Ministry of Personnel. He didn't have any great abilities, but he was good at forming cliques. He had a good reputation among the officials. However, he was still an old official and the Minister of War. What was the meaning of sending Chao Jie? He immediately said, This old man isn't looking for you. Tell your Minister Chen to come out and greet me. Minister Chen? There's no Minister Chen in the Ministry of Personnel. There's only Minister Chao. Official Kwang, have you become muddle-headed? An official from the Ministry of Personnel gave an answer without thinking too much in order to flatter Chao Jie. Chao Jie didn't say anything to stop his subordinates' rudeness. These old fellows were already so old, yet they still occupied such important positions. He had long found them unpleasant to the eye. Young people also needed to stand out. Thus, he allowed his subordinate to speak to Kwang Yi with such an attitude. Kwang Yi's health wasn't good to begin with. He should be recuperating at home. How could he have been provoked? In front of the emperor, he was given a seat and treated with kind words. Who would have thought that he would receive such treatment in the Ministry of Personnel? He would be directly contradicted by an unknown minor official. Kwang Yi's personality was very straightforward and impulsive. Most of the time, he was the one who didn't follow the rules. This was also one of the reasons why he was able to become the Minister of War. If you weren't strong enough, You wouldn't be able to control the people in the Ministry of War. When had he ever been treated like this? His face immediately flushed red with anger. However, when he thought of the country's great plan, he forcefully restrained himself. He didn't know what had happened recently, so he couldn't help but say, "I want to see Chen Sun." "You want to see Chen Sun? Easy. Go to the embroidered uniform guard's discipline prison." That minor official saw that Kuang Yi seemed to have been subdued by him. His face was full of pride and he spoke even more unscrupulously. Discipline prison? For a moment, Kuang Yi didn't quite understand. That's right, the discipline prison. At this moment, Chao Jie opened his mouth. It seemed as if he was explaining, but in reality, he just wanted to anger Kuang Yi. He wanted to use this opportunity to tell those old officials who had the final say in the Ministry of Personnel. They were old, so they shouldn't stand out and give orders. Not only is Chen Sun in the discipline prison, but Wang Zhua, Xiechong, Xiaoxian, and the others are also there. They actually said that the Nanming Empire wasn't a match for Yang Xie and caused a bad influence. They've all been arrested. Chao Jie had just finished speaking when he saw a black figure suddenly collapse in front of him. Upon closer inspection, he realized that Kuang Yi had fainted from anger. Blood was flowing out of the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he had fainted from anger. Considering Kuang Yi's seniority, if he really died in the Ministry of Personnel, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. He hurriedly shouted for people to carry the unconscious Kuang Yi and send him to the Kuang Manor. Then, he sent people to the palace to find an imperial physician. Kuang Yi fainted from anger, and his body's condition worsened. When he returned to the manor, he slowly woke up after tossing and turning and spitting out another mouthful of blood. He muttered the words "destroying the Great Wall," and fainted again. 3 days later, Kuang Yi finally breathed his last. This loyal official who had devoted his entire life to building the Great Ming Empire's army finally left the Great Ming Empire at a crucial time. This was all thanks to Mao Mu. He had captured all of the capable officials of the Nanming Empire and replaced them with officials who only knew how to fight for power and profit. In reality, they didn't have much ability. Not only did this cause the Nanming Empire's work to be unable to progress smoothly, it also caused Kuang Yi to faint from anger until he died of illness. However, at this time, no one cared about Kuang Yi's life or death. Even when Zhu Qizhen received the news, he only sent his prince, Zhu Jianshan, to offer his condolences. Speaking of Zhu Jianshan, he was already a young man of 21 years old. He was in his prime. In history, Emperor Xianzong of Ming Dynasty was wise and benevolent. He could be considered a good emperor. However, it was a pity that Yang Chendong's arrival changed everything. First, Zhu Qiyu seized the throne, causing Zhu Qizhen to no longer value familial love. In order to not repeat the same mistake, he didn't give the crown prince too much power. Secondly, Zhu Jianshan's mother was Madame Zhou. Because Empress Qian was in good health, she didn't die early under Mao Mu's care. She even gave birth to another prince for Zhu Qizhen, Zhu Jiani, who was now 11 years old. His mother wasn't favored, and he had a younger brother who could fight for power. As a result, he was never made the crown prince and was only an ordinary prince. This was especially true in the imperial palace. Now that Mao Mu was in power, he only had Zhu Jiani and the other young masters in his eyes. The other eunuchs naturally knew what to do. Zhu Jianshan's influence became weaker and weaker, and he could only do some unnecessary things. Kuang Yi died. Losing a great general before the great battle had even begun was somewhat unlucky. Although this great battle didn't happen, Kuang Yi wouldn't have been able to last long with his age and body. But things happened so coincidentally that the impact wasn't good. Mao Mu deliberately spread the news. For a time, whether it was in the imperial palace or among the common people, there were many unfavorable comments about the southern Ming Empire. This made the recruitment of soldiers even more difficult. After all, who would send their children to die in a war that they knew they were bound to lose? When the officials trembled and wrote a report about the recruitment of soldiers that didn't go well and presented it to Zhu Qizhen, this emperor who was plagued with misfortune didn't get angry. Or it could be said that he already knew everything and was mentally prepared. He didn't want to be like Kuang Yi and be angered to death by his officials. Zhu Qizhen couldn't help but think of those old officials. If those old officials were willing to help, things wouldn't be as bad as they were now. But when he thought of how those old officials had already been frightened by Yang Xie's strength, he didn't know what kind of problems would occur if he really used them. This idea was suppressed by him. If the recruitment of soldiers isn't going well, then we won't recruit for now. We now have 1.2 million soldiers in our hands and 800,000 soldiers on the front lines. We want them to fight a victory, and let our people see the might of our southern Ming Empire's army. Come, write a decree to Guanyin. Have him quickly attack and find an opportunity to destroy Yang Xie's army to strengthen the prestige of our southern Ming Empire. Zhu Qizhen was very straightforward and directly issued a decree to mobilize the army. It was said that 100 words couldn't compare to a single action. Then he would use practical actions to prove it. Chapter 1681. Guangdong Provincial Commissioner's Office. Jurisdiction: Guangzhou Prefecture, Zhaoqing Prefecture, Shaozhou Prefecture, Nanxiong Prefecture, Huizhou Prefecture, Chaozhou Prefecture, Gaozhou Prefecture, Laizhou Prefecture, Lianzhou Prefecture, Cheongzhou Prefecture, etc. Of course, Gaozhou Prefecture and Laizhou Prefecture had been taken over by Yang Xie's five-star army. As a result, Guangdong was no longer complete. This had once caused Guangdong Provincial Commissioner Yang Xian to tremble in fear, fearing that the five-star army would attack at any moment. Fortunately, the imperial court had negotiated with Yang Xie, and both sides seemed to have made peace. However, Yang Xie had been assassinated in the capital, and Chao Jixiang had brought a fake imperial edict to incite Yang Xie's servant, Yang Lu, to rebel. After Yang Xie took out the imperial edict from Chao Jixiang's hands, the Southern Ming imperial court naturally did not admit to it. They claimed that it was Chao Jixiang's own actions, and reprimanded it for being fake. However, anyone with a bit of judgment knew that it was definitely Zhu Qizhen's doing. Although eunuchs had a lot of power, they did not have the guts to forge an imperial edict to reclaim the title of king. This was not the first time Yang Xian had cursed Chao Jixiang's incompetence. If you want to do it, then so be it. It is said that the strongest fortress is the easiest to break through from the inside. Instigating the people of the Yang faction to rebel is the right direction, but the key is why you didn't succeed, and the evidence was even obtained by others. If this isn't incompetence, then what is? Now, with such an excuse, Yang Xie would have enough reason to attack. As such, Yang Xian quickly mobilized his troops and made the decision to fight against Yang Xie. At this moment, the imperial court had also seen this scene clearly. The reinforcements had arrived. When General Guanyin brought 300,000 soldiers to Guangzhou Prefecture, Yang Xian's heart calmed down, and he hurriedly brought his officials to welcome them. After all this training, Guanyin had finally matured and became a great general. He had 300,000 soldiers under his command, and could be said to be very proud of himself. However, if one looked closely, one could see the worry in his eyes. Guanyin had dealt with the five-star army a long time ago, and they had worked together to quell a riot. At that time, the strength of the five-star army had shocked Guanyin. Now, so many years had passed, and Yang Xie had taken over several territories of the Great Ming Dynasty. The strength of the other party could be imagined. It could be said that this mission would not be easy to complete. The general died in 100 battles. As a trusted general of the Southern Ming Dynasty, it was Guanying's fate to die on the battlefield. He couldn't refuse it, and he wouldn't refuse it. He wanted to see how strong the five-star army had become. He wanted to teach the five-star army a lesson, and let them know that in front of the Southern Ming Empire, the five-star army was nothing. The 300,000-strong army directly moved to the outskirts of the city and set up temporary barracks. Guanyin and his group entered the city and met the civil and military officials of Guangdong. As one of the most important guards in Guangdong, General Li Hani of the Guanghai Guards reported the situation to Guanyin. For this person to be able to become the commander of a guard, he was quite capable. At the very least, he had a clear understanding of the strength of the five-star army and the numbers of the troops sent out. General Guan, the five-star army on the other side has around 100,000 strong soldiers. They have the 3rd Legion as the main force, with the 2nd Division of the Lungfeng Division and the 1st Division of the Russian Empire as support. The 3rd Legion has around 50,000 strong infantry and firearms. The 2nd Division of the Lungfeng Division is all firearms, and the 1st Division of the Russian Empire is all cavalry, numbering around 50,000 strong. There are also some auxiliary troops transporting rations, but the number is unknown. Oh right, I heard from the scouts that Bugnam of Gojoseon will personally come to the front lines to command the battle. After he finished speaking, General Li Hani returned to his seat. Yang Xian and the other civil officials all looked at Guaning expectantly, waiting for his reply. Guaning had already noticed everyone's gazes and knew that he had to make a statement to reassure them. He immediately laughed and said with a magnanimous tone, "Very good, General Li has done a lot of work. Since we know the enemy's deployment, the rest will be easy. This time, I have brought 200,000 strong soldiers. Including the soldiers from Guangdong, we have a total of 300,000 strong soldiers. The enemy only has 100,000 strong soldiers. With 3 against 1 and the terrain advantage, how can we not win? Yes, we have the advantage in numbers and are more familiar with the terrain. We will definitely win." Yang Xian and the others agreed. For a moment, everyone voiced their agreement, as if they had already won the battle. Kuang Ye's expression did not change. All these years, he had been studying the tactics of the 5-star army. Although he did not personally go to the front lines, he could see how powerful the enemy was from their achievements. He had never underestimated his opponent. If the 5-star army was easy to deal with, they would not have such glorious achievements. However, it was absolutely impossible for the Southern Ming Empire to surrender without a fight just based on this battle record. Kuang Ye's face was full of fighting spirit. "My lords, the 5-star troop is very aggressive this time. I heard that they are either on horseback or on bicycles, and they move very quickly. In order to prevent them from using their advantage, I have decided to defend the Guangzhou prefecture in this battle and unite the army into one fist. We will use our advantage to fight them at the city gates. Good, this is a good idea. We'll combine our advantages and allow them to move too quickly. In the end, they'll still have to obediently come to the city and fight with us." Li Hani was the first to agree. The 2 generals had the same opinion, and those civil officials who didn't understand military tactics all expressed their agreement. The left envoy of Guangdong, Yang Xian, expressed that he would take care of the food reserves and ensure that the army had enough to eat. After the meeting, the Southern Ming Empire quickly took action. The Southern Ming Empire's army in the nearby cities received the order and quickly left the city to gather in the direction of the Guangzhou prefecture. In a short period of time, the Southern Ming Empire's military strength in the Guangzhou prefecture reached 450,000 soldiers. The 5-star army that was marching towards Guangdong also received intelligence from the spies in the various cities. They knew that the Southern Ming Empire's army was retreating to the Guangzhou prefecture and intended to fight a decisive battle with them. Immediately, they sped up their march and headed straight for the prefecture of Guangzhou. After a few months of training, the Third Army had regained its original personnel structure. The missing personnel were transferred from Crimson City and were all carefully trained by the 1st Division of the Cold Front. With the addition of these people, Wu Sheng's confidence skyrocketed. Now he was just waiting for the right opportunity to fight the Southern Ming Empire. In Yang Xie's army, the Third Army's composition was the most complicated. They had infantry, cavalry, and firearms. This was also because the Third Army was formed under the pincer attack of the Ross Duchy and the Golden Horde. They were far away from the rear and couldn't get any supplies or personnel to replenish their forces. Fortunately, they had persevered until now and finally achieved results. The Third Army had grown from less than 8,000 soldiers to more than 50,000 soldiers. Now they could be described as having high morale and powerful combat strength. The Third Army was already so powerful, let alone the 2nd Division of the Cold Front. Although there were only about 10,000 of them, they were all made up of musketeers. It wasn't difficult for them to do so as they were all motorized troops. The 3-wheeled motorcycles that filled the entire 2nd Division allowed their movement speed to increase by more than 10 times. During this period of time, after Crimson City successfully built the first 3-wheeled motorcycle, They sped up the production process. In the end, they produced close to 10,000 motorcycles, all of which were allocated to the 2nd, 4th, and 5th divisions of the Cold Front. Originally, the 2nd Division of the Cold Front needed to use bicycles to increase their speed. Now that they were motorized soldiers, they were filled with fighting spirit and only wanted to perform well on the battlefield to repay Bugnam of Gojoseon's kindness. Now that they had two strong armies, the 1st Division of the Russian Empire was not worth mentioning. Although they were all cavalry, they were not part of the Han army, so they were only used as reserves for this battle. Although Division Commander Ahuli was a little disappointed, he did not complain at all. Instead, he kept his subordinates under control and warned them that their opponents this time were the Han. Without orders, they were not to kill innocent people. Otherwise, no one would be able to save them. In addition, Yang Chendong had also come. Along with him were 5,000 black cavalry soldiers and 100,000 logistics soldiers. These were Han auxiliary soldiers who had undergone short training. Their role was not on the battlefield. Other than transporting supplies, they were mainly responsible for guarding prisoners and propagating the Yangxia policy. Obviously, Yang Chendong had already predicted the outcome of this battle before the battle even started. If they could not defeat the infantry of the Southern Ming Army with firearms and cavalry, then the Five-Star Army did not want to unify the world. It was better for them to obediently stay in the city and wait for death. With firearms that were much more advanced than this era, Yang Chendong had already treated the Southern Ming as his own backyard. If it was not for the fact that he wanted to conquer this place with the smallest price, the army would have continued to advance after conquering the 3 provinces. What reason was there for a war between countries? That was just a lack of confidence. A true expert would not do such a thing. I am stronger than you, so I want to take care of you. So what? Not satisfied? If not, then come and fight. Just like how the Yangxia conquered other countries, there was no need for a reason. He just needed to beat you until you could not take care of yourself. In the end, you would have no choice but to surrender. However, Yang Chendong believed that he was already very lenient towards the Southern Ming Empire, the land of the Han people. His original plan was to reform them and assimilate them at the same time. In the end, he would be able to take down the entire Southern Ming Empire without shedding a drop of blood. However, as more and more intelligence department telegrams were sent to him, he had no choice but to change his mind. When he saw the telegram that the Southern Ming Empire was preparing for war, it had caused the people to have no way of making a living. They were looking for strong men everywhere to gather food and military equipment. Most of the people were already at the point where they could no longer survive. Thus, he had no choice but to deal with the pain quickly, and decided to conquer the Southern Ming Empire by force. Only then would they be able to take down the Southern Ming Empire in a shorter period of time, and save the Han people. Chapter 1682. As for Chao Jixiang's matter, it was just a coincidence. This was equivalent to giving Yang Chendong an honorable reason. How could he not use it? Riding on the White Dragon, Yang Chendong charged towards Guangzhou City under the protection of the 5,000 black cavalry. At the same time, the vanguard of the 2nd Division of the Lung Vanguard had arrived at the city gate tower and started setting up camp 8 miles away from the city. Hundreds of light and heavy machine guns had been set up on the trenches that had been temporarily dug. Although there were only 2,000 people, there was no fear on Gao Xiang's face. In his heart, he still hoped that the South Ming Army would take the initiative to attack. In that case, he would be able to make the first contribution. What was disappointing was that the South Ming Army in the Guangzhou Prefecture didn't seem to have any intention of doing anything when they arrived. General Guaning stopped the other generals who wanted to go out to battle. Obviously, he didn't care about the 2,500-star army that had arrived first, because his plan was bigger. Over the years, the South Ming Army had developed. For example, they had created mini cannons. Due to the limitations of their technology, their cannons could only fire 3 miles away and they used solid bullets. However, when 200 cannons were set up on the city walls, it gave people a sense of security. Guaning already had a plan in his mind. This time he would wait for the enemy to charge over. He only needed to defend. That way his cannons could be used to attack. He wanted to take down the 5-star army's prestige on the city walls, and use this battle to tell the world that the 5-star army was not invincible. Just last night, Guanning received the news that his teacher, Kuang Yi, had passed away. He also knew that because of the news of Yang Xie's strength in the capital, the recruitment of soldiers was not effective. Many of the soldiers that were originally set up had disappeared. The 2.5 million soldiers that the South Ming had prepared were now only 1.5 million. They had lost 1 million soldiers. Guanning was naturally very sad about the death of his teacher. However, the battle was imminent and grief could not solve the problem. He had to think of a way to win this battle in order to better comfort his teacher's soul in heaven. At the same time, if they fought this battle well, it would strengthen the confidence of the Southern Ming dynasty and the people. Only then would they be able to recruit more soldiers and fight a long battle with the 5-star army. In the end, they would achieve the ultimate goal of not invading the Southern Ming dynasty. On this point, Guanning clearly knew his own limits. He knew that it was impossible for the South Ming Empire to defeat Yang Xie. Disregarding everything else, the other party had taken over so much territory and stationed troops everywhere. Once all of them were called back, just the number alone was enough to scare people to death. Therefore, he only asked for a draw. In the end, the Southern Ming Empire would recognize Bugnam of Gojoseon as a legitimate country, and the Southern Ming Empire would be able to govern itself. However, this goal was not so easy to achieve. To be safe, Guanning chose to defend. He wanted to use the city walls to block the 5-star army. Commander Gao Xiang waited until the next morning. After seeing that the Southern Ming Empire had no intention of attacking, he knew that the other party would not take the initiative to attack. Immediately, he reported what had happened and his analysis to the division headquarters using an electric suit. Not long after, Yang Chendong also received the news. Haha, young master, this Guanning has grown up. He can keep his composure. However, he thinks that he can stop our army with 450,000 soldiers. That's a bit of a fantasy. Beta Persei, who was accompanying him, also saw this telegram. He immediately looked down on Guanning and laughed. Yang Lu had been killed. A white silk had ended his life. It could be considered a dignified death. At that time, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Yang San, Yang Si, and Yang Wu were all present. They could be considered brothers and they came to send him off. Although Yang Lu was dead, the impact of the incident had already happened. Other than Tiger's Mane, the other servants could not help but worry about their future. After all, such a thing had happened. If the young master was no longer close to them, it would be reasonable. Fortunately, Yang Chendong was only concerned about the incident and not the person. Yang Lu was dead, so in his eyes the matter was considered over. This time, he still brought Beta Persei with him. As soon as the signal was sent, it completely calmed the hearts of the servants. It also let the other officials of Yang Xie know that the servants were still servants. They were still trusted by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Some people who originally wanted to replace Yang Lu also gave up on this idea. The situation in Yang Xie became stable again. Okay, Beta Persei, go and call Yu Mian over. Yang Chendong also smiled. Beta Persei's words on this matter were very much in line with his thoughts. In modern warfare, whoever had more people would not necessarily win, and whoever defended would have more advantages. The power and advanced weapons would ultimately determine the route of victory and defeat. Just like in the original historical spacetime, on the battlefield of Normandy, a German machine gunner killed more than 1,000 Allied soldiers with a machine gun. This was enough proof. Of course, not all armies applied this model. For example, the soldiers of the People's Liberation Army in the future defeated their opponents one by one with a rifle. But this theory was still applicable to most of the enemies of the army. After a while, Yu Mian came in front of Yang Chendong. Speaking of which, the two had not seen each other for a long time. The last time they met, they even made a bet. It turned out that Yang Chendong won again. Today, the Far Eastern province had long become one of Yang Xie's important granaries. There was a large area of fertile land, rich in forest resources and various minerals. It could be said that except for the cold climate, it was already perfect. Especially after the construction of the train tracks. In spring, summer, and autumn, the people chose to work. In winter, they left their homes to travel or relax in the 3 eastern provinces. It was a beautiful life. It was equivalent to Yu Mian losing to Yang Qindong. This time, no one brought up the matter of the bet. They called Yu Mian to talk about the reconstruction of the southern Ming dynasty and persuading them to surrender. Yu Mian, with our powerful military strength, it won't take long for us to win on the battlefield. Persuading the officials of the southern Ming dynasty to surrender, and the reconstruction work after the war will be handed over to you. How is it? Do you have any difficulties? Yu Mian was already in his 40s, and was in the prime of his life. When he heard Yang Qindong's question, he immediately straightened his posture and said, replying to the 6th young master, I promise to complete the task. Yu Mian had this confidence because this time, there were 5,000 cadres from Rejing City accompanying him. These people were all cultured and experienced management talents. There were also 5,000 cadres from other Yangtze provinces. They had considerable experience in migration, land distribution, and city reconstruction. Adding on the fact that Rejing City had prepared enough food and necessities, Yu Mian was confident that he could complete this task. It had to be said that Yang Qindong's migration policy was really good. Because of the migration, the barriers between the different races were disrupted, and the opposing voices could not work together. Every time they went to a new place, they would face a group of unfamiliar people, and even unfamiliar races. No matter how capable and ambitious they were, in this kind of environment, they could only lower their heads and accept their fate. Not to mention, the Yangtze did not disregard the people after the migration. They distributed land, houses, seeds, food, and necessities, and so on. They hoped that the people after the migration would have food to eat and houses to live in. Like this, who would think of rebelling? To most of the people, they did not ask for much. As long as they had a place to settle down, they would be satisfied. As for the rise and fall of a race, that was something that only a few ambitious people would think about. It was not something that the common people should think about. It was because of this migration policy that there were very few rebellions in Yangtze's territory. Almost every piece of land that they occupied, other than having to pay a hefty price in the beginning to provide money, after a few years, this place would begin to exert its power and provide food and money to the Yang faction. This also helped the Yang faction to grow stronger and stronger. Of course, the prerequisite for this was that most of the people were uncultured. If it was the future where everyone was familiar with the history of their race, it would be difficult to carry out such a large-scale migration, and there would be endless problems. It was also because of this that the Yangtze started to popularize culture in their territory. The difference was that everyone, regardless of race, had to learn the Han culture, write Chinese, and speak the Han language. This was tantamount to a cultural assimilation. Like this, many years later, everyone would only know about the Han culture, and would not know that there were so many different languages in the world. The more Yu Mian thought about this, the more he admired Yang Qindong. In fact, it was not just him. In the entire Yangtze, most of the Han officials admired Yang Qindong, and this admiration turned into respect. Yang Qindong did not feel much about this. He only knew that since he had come to this world, and had brought Tsang with him, he had to do something. It was just that the results were out of his expectations, but this kind of result was even better, and he was even happier. After Yu Mian did not have any more questions, he quickly bid farewell and left. Yang Qindong rode the White Dragon, and the Black Cavalry went straight to the Guangzhou Prefecture. April 1468 AD. Under the Guangzhou Prefecture city, more than 100,000 five-star army were stationed here. The bright five-star flag fluttered in the wind, and from afar, it was a world of red flags. As more and more five-star army soldiers gathered, the South Ming army on the city gate tower continuously moved boulders, wooden sleepers, kerosene, bows, and other things to the top of the city gate tower, as if they were going to defend to the death. With these resources, they were confident that the five-star army wouldn't be able to return, and would suffer heavy losses. Guaning even found Commander Li Hani, and proposed that if the five-star army failed to attack the city, they would send out an army to counterattack. All the war horses in the city were also mobilized, forming a total of 5,000 cavalrymen. When the time was right, they would counterattack with all their might and obtain the final victory of the Guangzhou prefecture city. Chapter 1683. With a large pile of defensive equipment, sufficient soldiers, and enough provisions to last for a year, Guanning had a calm and steady look on his face. He wanted to see what the five-star army, who had always been known to be invincible, would do at this moment. It was said that one's thoughts determined one's vision. Guan Ying's scope was still too small. At most, he had a place in the southern Ming dynasty. Compared to Yang Shi, who had already conquered all of Asia, and even had a navy that was advancing towards Europe and the Western countries, it was not an exaggeration to say that Guanning was like a firefly compared to the bright moon. Just as Guanning was thinking about how to defend, the five-star army's cannons were ready to assemble at the Guangzhou government. This time, the five-star army was using the newly developed 120mm field cannon. Compared to the 90mm field cannon, which had a range of 10 miles, and the 75mm field cannon, which had a range of 6 miles, it could shoot up to 15 miles. The larger the caliber, the greater the lethality. Everything was difficult at the beginning. Once the beginning was made, the next step would be much easier. The lathes were constantly being updated. In addition, there were many new cannons in the warehouse for people to imitate and research. Currently, the progress of the cannons in the Crimson City was increasing rapidly. It was worth mentioning that the new weapons were mainly used on the Navy's ships for the conquest of the West. The new weapons allowed Yang Xie's military committee member and deputy commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, to fight against the foreign races with greater ease. After a few months, they had already conquered the Cape of Good Hope and landed in Africa's Niger River. It was foreseeable that news of their victory would arrive soon. Yang Chendong had also thought of boarding a large ship and killing his way to the west. However, no one agreed to this suggestion. The sea was different from the land. Danger could come at any time. If something happened to Yang Chendong, no one would be able to take responsibility. Helpless, Yang Chendong could only give up on this idea. The 2nd Division of the Cold Front Division's cannons were pulled 5 miles away from the Guangzhou government. This distance was out of the range of the southern Ming's red coat cannons. Accompanying the division commander, Xiao Feng, to inspect the cannons was a young man. Crown Prince Chang, please be careful. When he saw that the young man was actually carrying the ammunition box with the artillery soldiers, Commander Xiao Feng, who had never frowned in the face of so many enemies on the battlefield, broke out in cold sweat. The young man was Yang Bo. This time, he had taken the initiative to come to the battlefield. Yang Chendong also agreed. If he wanted to inherit his great cause, he had to learn this lesson on the battlefield. Only by doing so would he know that victory was not easy to come by. Only by doing so would he be able to intimidate Yang Xie's 3 armies and the millions of soldiers that he would have in the future. In order to train Yang Bo, other than returning to Yang Chendong's side at night to report what he had seen and heard, he was allowed to roam freely in the army to observe what he was interested in. Under safe circumstances, no one was allowed to stop him. As a matter of fact, when Yang Bo heard that the artillery soldiers were about to attack, he took the initiative to come. This frightened Xiao Feng. He knew that this person was very precious. Not to mention that his life was in danger. Even if his skin was scratched, he would not be able to bear the consequences. Helplessly, he could only accompany him. This caused the artillery regiment's commander, Lin Luan, to be very careful as he led a group of artillery regiment's officers to protect him. All right, Division Commander Xiao, Regiment Commander Lin, go do what you are supposed to do. I am here to learn and experience, not to be protected. Yang Bo, who was already 12 years old, saw that there was nothing he could do with so many people surrounding him. He could not help but put down what he was doing, and turn to look at Yang Bo and the others. Crown Prince Chang, but Xiao Feng and the others wanted to say something, but Yang Bo's face darkened. Follow my orders. This is a military order. You cannot disobey it. Needless to say, Yang Bo, who was wearing a custom-made military uniform that was a few sizes smaller, was quite impressive when he was angry. At the very least, he managed to intimidate Xiao Feng and the others. They had to obey military orders. After saluting in unison, they went back to doing what they were supposed to do. Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu led 200 black cavalry soldiers to watch from the side. Their faces were filled with gratification. The Crown Prince Chang's aura was getting stronger and stronger. It would not be long before he had the ability to inherit the sixth young master's legacy. This was just a small interlude. The cold vanguard soldiers were busy. Guaning received the news from the top of the Guangzhou Prefecture's city gate tower and was looking around. They had something similar to binoculars in their hands, but the quality was not as good as the five-star armies. They could only see further. They are deploying the artillery. They are about 5 miles away from us. Our artillery cannot reach that far. Guaning put down his binoculars and frowned as he spoke. He knew the power of the artillery and knew that it was the five-star army's forte. They were no match for them in this aspect. However, it did not matter. The main point of attacking a city was to take down the city. It was not a competition of whose artillery was more powerful. Your artillery could not possibly charge up the city gate tower like a human. In the end, they still had to rely on humans to climb up the city gate. Not to mention, Guaning had already arranged enough troops in the streets of the city. This was the embryonic form of urban warfare. There were quite a lot of people in the prefecture of Guangzhou at the moment. There were more than 450,000 soldiers. In addition to the civilians who rushed over from various prefectures, there were more than 1 million people. This was because there were many commoners who had left the southern Ming Empire for Qiqian City. Otherwise, the number of commoners alone would have exceeded 2 million. Remember, when the enemy's artillery fire, you must find a place to hide. Do not run around. That will only increase the danger. Also, we don't need to arrange too many soldiers on the city gate tower for the time being. When the enemy's cannons have finished firing, the soldiers will rush up the city gate tower and give the five-star army a fatal blow. As Guaning spoke, someone beside him was recording. After a while, these words would be transmitted to the ears of the various generals. Just from these arrangements, one could see that Guaning was indeed capable. At the very least, he knew how to avoid the spearhead. However, it was a pity that he had too little understanding of the power of the artillery. In other words, he had underestimated the power of the five-star army's artillery. This meant that he was destined to lose in the end. The artillery regiment was deployed. The artillery regiment was divided into 3 groups. They were respectively guarding the north, west, and south gates of the Guangzhou prefecture. Only the east gate was left. This was what the art of war referred to as Surround 3 and Block 1. If the enemy was left with a chance of survival, they would not risk their lives to fight back. Outside the east gate, the 3rd Corps and the 1st Division had already prepared an ambush. They were just waiting for the South Ming Army to escape from here. Then they would deal with them once and for all. After the artillery was set up, the ammunition was also transported. The sky was already dark. Yang Chendong decided to launch the artillery attack early in the morning. As such, the soldiers fell asleep early in the morning. Yang Bo, on the other hand, could not fall asleep. After thinking about it in bed, he went to Yang Chendong's main tent. Yang Chendong did not sleep. With his current body, he only needed to meditate for 2 hours when he was tired and let the qi in his body circulate through his body several times. After that, he would be full of energy again. He had already passed this set of techniques to Yang Chendong. Perhaps it was because of his physique that he had transmigrated to. Yang Chendong could cultivate qi and control it well. However, Yang Bo was still unable to do so. He still needed more time to practice. Yang Chendong, who had not slept, was looking at the telegrams sent from various departments. He would ponder from time to time. When he thought of something, he would write down some instructions. When Beta Persei said that Crown Prince Chang wanted to see him, he stopped writing and sat up straight. Yang Bo entered the tent and bowed respectfully. Then he called out, "Father." "Bo, it's already so late. Why aren't you sleeping? Are you too excited?" "Haha." Yang Chendong waved his hand and called Yang Bo to sit beside him. "Father, Bo is not excited. I just don't understand some things, Young Bo said with an expression of asking for advice. Oh, what is it that you don't understand? Tell me about it. Yang Chendong had a fatherly smile on his face. He liked Young Bo's attitude of asking for advice. There was nothing shameful about asking if he did not understand. On the contrary, pretending to know when he did not know would ruin things. Yes. Young Bo took the initiative to stand up and asked with an expression of learning. Father, you once said that your greatest wish was to bring the Han people to the peak of the world, to bring harmony to the world, and to let the Han people live the best lives. However, if we were to bombard like this, wouldn't the Guangzhou prefecture be destroyed? Wouldn't the Han people in the city be killed as well? Wouldn't that be? What would that be? Yang Bo did not say, but he believed that his father would understand his question. Haha, very good. Boer's thoughts of pitying the people are good. However, it is impossible for there to be no deaths in a war. Most importantly, if we are able to eliminate the 450,000 soldiers of the Southern Ming Empire, it will play a positive role in our conquest of the Southern Ming Empire. Using this battle to determine victory and defeat will reduce the difficulty of our conquest. This is very worthwhile. Furthermore, be it the soldiers or the people in the city, they are not innocent. The soldiers were ordered to fight. If we don't kill them, they will kill us. As for the people, when we gave them the chance to leave from the various ports and head to Qiqian City, many of them left obediently. However, there are still some who stayed behind. Do you know why? This. Young Bo pondered for a moment before saying, I'm afraid that the people who stayed behind do not trust us. They still have fantasies about the Southern Ming Empire. Very good, Boer is right. Since they do not trust us, and they have made their own choice, they are our enemies. We cannot show mercy to our enemies, so it is not wrong to bombard them. Of course, they are Han people after all. If they did not help the Southern Ming Empire, and chose to abandon the city and escape, Father will do his best to be merciful and not take their lives. However, if they did something wrong, they will be punished. All of their assets will be confiscated, and they will be put through labor for 1 to 3 years. After they are released, they will still be Han people, and can enjoy the fruits of our labor. This is a reward and punishment. Chapter 1684. Such a detailed explanation made Yang Bo nod his head continuously. He finally understood his father's painstaking efforts. At this moment, the haze on Yang Bo's face disappeared. Instead, he bowed deeply. Father Boer will remember your words. Ah, good. Yang Chendong patted Yang Bo's shoulder with a gratified expression. In fact, as Yang Chendong thought, the commoners who accompanied the South Ming army in the Guangzhou prefecture did indeed treat the five-star army as an opponent. This was not as simple as distrust. Among the commoners, there were mainly tyrants. They had already received news that wherever the five-star army went, the rich would only be able to leave behind 20% of their wealth. This was something they could not accept. Although most of their wealth came from the Great Ming Dynasty's good policies and exploitation, this was also a kind of ability, wasn't it? Why should the wealth that they worked so hard to obtain be handed over to the Yangxia? They could not understand, so they wanted to be enemies with the five-star army. In order to let the South Ming army win the war, these tyrants even took out money and food to provide for the South Ming army. With such people, even if they died under artillery fire, Yang Chendong would not feel the slightest bit of heartache. Other than these tyrants, there were also some elderly people. They did not want to leave their homes. Even if they died, they wanted to die in their homeland. Of course, the proportion of such people was very small. There was also a group of scholars from the Great Ming Dynasty. They had learned the ways of Confucius and Mencius from a young age, and were very knowledgeable. Under the Great Ming Dynasty's system, bookworms like them had a very high chance of becoming government officials. However, once they were transferred to the Yang faction, they would no longer have any prospects for development. And so these people stayed behind. But even if they stayed behind, when they saw the South Ming army practicing formations in the barracks before the war started, they still looked down on them and said, "They are really all brawn and no brains. Their actions are a disgrace to the educated." He was about to die, surrounded and unable to go anywhere. Yet he still looked down on martial artists and soldiers. Even if such a person entered the Yangtze, he would still be reformed. Even if some of these people died, no one would feel sorry for them. In short, the people who stayed behind were all enemies of the Yang faction. Even if they were enemies, how could they be innocent under the fire of the cannons? The night passed uneventfully, and the sun rose as usual the next morning. The soldiers of the 5-star army had a hot breakfast early in the morning. When it was 7 o'clock, the artillery soldiers were in position, and the shells were loaded. Commander Lin Luan, who had the rank of senior colonel, Lung Feng's officers were all high-ranking officers, raised a small red flag and shouted loudly in front of everyone. Target, Guangzhou Prefecture City Wall. Distance, 5 miles. Direction to the left 004. +2. Reload. Delay fuse. Everyone get ready. As the red flag suddenly fell, Lin Luan shouted again, fire. Boom. 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 Cannonballs shot out of the barrel and headed straight for the prefecture of Guangzhou. After the cannons were fired from the west gate, the cannons were fired from the north gate and south gate as well. For a moment, the sound of cannons rumbled, causing the earth to tremble. The Guangzhou prefecture's city walls, which were marked as the attacking side, were instantly riddled with holes. As the cannonballs landed one after another, pieces of the walls fell off, and waves of cries and screams rang out. It was clear that under the bombardment, many southern Ming soldiers were hit, and the screams came from the mouths of these soldiers. The southern Ming soldiers couldn't even raise their heads after being hit by the blazing flames one after another. These country bumpkins finally saw the power of the Yangtze cannons. It was definitely not something their red coat cannons could compare to. The 200 red coat cannons that were set up in the surroundings were now in a miserable state. Under the barrage of cannon fire, it was smashed into a pile of scrap metal. It was impossible for it to display its strength. Hearing that the cannons were all destroyed, Guan Ying's face showed a look of heartache. However, the southern Ming generals beside him did not notice this. Instead, they kept flattering him. Thanks to the general's great foresight, we had the soldiers withdraw from the city tower in advance. Otherwise, the losses this time would be too great. Yes, I really did not expect the 5-star army's cannons to be so powerful. Of course, they did not expect that we had already made arrangements under the general's orders. This time these cannons are destined to return empty-handed. When they are done, it will be time for us to show our power. The generals were all talking at once, one after another. Those who did not know would think that they were already the victors. After half an hour of artillery fire, the explosions finally became weaker and weaker until they completely disappeared. Guan Ying's expression returned to normal. Although the red coat cannons that he had arranged were destined to not be of much use, it was still a great contribution to preserve the main force of the army. Now it was up to their own skills. Come, send everyone up to the city tower. The cannons have stopped firing. The 5-star army should be preparing to attack. For a moment, the sound of soldiers shouting could be heard everywhere. The southern Ming soldiers who had been hiding also began to rush up the city tower. However, when they really reached the city tower, they realized that there were no enemies in front of them. There was also no sign of the 5-star army. What's going on? Why didn't they charge? Many of the generals on the city tower were puzzled. Guaning also did not immediately understand. He stood there and was vexed. Suddenly he thought of a possibility. He immediately shouted, "Not good, the 5-star army is going to continue firing. Quickly, everyone retreat." After shouting, Guaning ignored the others and was the first to go down the city tower. At this moment, the cannons sounded again. The 5-star army's cannons had covered the city for the second time. As a person from the future, Yang Chendong was naturally more familiar with the use of cannons than other people. For example, the second cannons had already been used during the anti-Japanese war. This method would often cause the enemy to be unable to grasp the situation, and would often cause them to pay a heavy price. Previously, Yang Chendong did not know that Guaning had withdrawn the army in advance. The second cannons that he ordered were just a habit. It was this habit that caught the southern Ming army off guard. and caused them to suffer heavy losses. Many of the Southern Ming army still did not know what was going on. While they were still crowded on the city tower, the cannons rumbled and landed on the city wall. One by one, the Southern Ming army was blown away, killed or injured. Just the second round of cannon fire had affected at least 4,000 Southern Ming soldiers. When the cannons stopped, the city tower was filled with broken limbs. Occasionally, there were people who were lucky enough to survive. However, they were also injured and crying in pain. At this time, there were no effective anti-inflammatory drugs. Once the injuries were too serious, they were basically waiting for death. Less than 4 hours after the battle started, there were already more than 1,000 injured people. Moreover, these people might not be able to be treated. Guan Ying's expression became even uglier. He was not afraid of the 5-star army attacking the city. With his preparations in advance, as well as the sufficient troops and food in the city, he was confident that he could fight a big battle with the 5-star army. Even if he could not win, he would be able to remain undefeated for a certain period of time. However, the feeling of not being able to see anyone and being hit by long-range cannons was really not good. It gave people a feeling that they could not use their strength. The cannons stopped for the second time. This time the 5-star army moved. However, they only sent out a few people. Each of them held a metal loudspeaker, and came to a place 1 arrow away from the city tower. They shouted loudly, "Southern Ming Army, listen up. The 5-star army is willing to accept the injured Southern Ming soldiers, because we are all Han people. You just need to use a crane to lower them down from the city tower. Then our army will take them away for treatment to save their lives. There is no need to thank us. If you want to thank someone, thank your parents for giving birth to you in the land of Han people. Southern Ming Army, listen up. The 5-star army is..." The shouts came again and again. Several people took turns to shout. There were people below the city gates. This way, they could ensure that the Southern Ming soldiers in the city could hear them clearly. After another half an hour, the people who had shouted finally turned around and left. Seeing the 5-star army leave, a few generals looked at Guaning worriedly and asked, "General, what should we do? How was this treating a patient?" This was clearly a psychological tactic. This was to buy people's hearts and also to mess up their morale. How could Guaning not know what was going on? However, the other party did not attack the city. What could he do? Thinking that he could not mess up before attacking the city, Guaning gritted his teeth and said, "Find the best doctors in the city and let them treat the injured. This will calm the soldiers down." This was clearly going against the 5-star army. It was also telling the soldiers that the 5-star army could save them. The Southern Ming Imperial Court could also save them. They just needed to work hard. As expected, this move was effective. When the other Southern Ming soldiers saw the injured being carried into various hospitals, and the doctors running over to treat them, they were very happy. This also indirectly proved that if they were injured, they would not be abandoned. This meant that they had a higher chance of survival. After breaking the psychological breakdown of the 5-star army, before they could take a breather, the sound of cannons rang out again. However, this time, the cannons did not land on the city tower. Instead, they fired towards the Guangzhou prefecture. For a moment, the sound of cannons could be heard everywhere in the city. Because some places were made of wood, they were directly set on fire. The cannons directly extended into the city, and caught the Southern Ming army off guard. Without enough preparation, they suffered heavy losses. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.